In the cold, digital dawn of October 1998, as the world obsessed over the coming millennium and the perceived threat of Y2K, a much quieter and far more permanent catastrophe was unfolding. Within a 72-hour window, the global record underwent a microscopic surgery. 14 of the most brilliant minds in cryptography, analog signal processing, and theoretical mathematics simply ceased to exist. They were not merely kidnapped, they were unwritten, their bank accounts reverted to zero before vanishing from server logs. Their birth certificates in local archives were replaced by misfiled, blank parchment. Their digital footprints, sparse as they were in the late 90s, were scrubbed by a classified high-level encryption protocol that shouldn't have existed for another 20 years. These were the elite, the men and women who understood the deep fiber networks better than the architects themselves. They were the only ones capable of seeing the anomaly in the code, and then they were gone. No bodies were recovered. No ransom notes were sent. In the apartments they left behind, investigators found coffee still warm in ceramic mugs and half-finished equations on chalkboards. But the people were a vacuum. One internal NSA file recovered decades later from a flooded basement in Maryland contained only a single haunting sentence regarding the event. The anomaly has been neutralized. The record is now clean. The file was stamped never open, yet we begin tonight. The only sound is the quiet, rhythmic hum of a server room, a sound that has become the heartbeat of our modern era. The file we examine tonight is cold to the touch. The paper is heavy, the kind of cardstock used only by the highest levels of government bureaucracy before the digital shift. The ink has faded, not with age, but with a calculated chemical degradation, as if the secrets it holds were meant to dissolve along with the memories of the people it describes. The air in this archive is still. It smells of old ozone and static electricity. As we turn the page, we move away from the world of the scene, into the world of the redacted dot. To understand the 72-hour vacuum, we must first look at the subjects. These were not public figures. They were ghost nodes, individuals who worked in the shadows of academia and private intelligence. Consider Dr. Elias Thorne. In 1998, Thorne was the world's leading expert in nonlinear signal decryption. He lived in a modest home in Alexandria, Virginia. He had no social media, for the concept did not exist. He had no cell phone. He communicated via a series of dead drops and landline calls that were never longer than 30 seconds. On the morning of October 14th, Thorne was seen by a neighbor, carrying a stack of leather-bound journals to his car. By noon, his car was found idling in a parking garage at Dulles International Airport. The keys were in the ignition. Thorne was gone. But more unsettling was what happened at the Social Security Administration that same hour. Thorne's file, a physical folder, was pulled by an unidentified agent. When it was returned, every document inside was blank. The ink had been lifted, leaving only the ghost of his name in the indentations of the paper. Then there was Sarah Van Camp, a prodigy in fiber optic vulnerability. She was 29 years old, working for a private contractor in Seattle. She had predicted, with terrifying accuracy, that the world's transition to a fully digital infrastructure would create a backdoor for a centralized intelligence that no human could control. On October 15th, during a high-level meeting, Sarah excused herself to use the restroom. She never returned. Her colleagues waited 10 minutes, then 20. When they checked the hallway, the security footage showed something that defies logic. Sarah walked toward the door, and as she passed under the fluorescent light, the frame skipped. In that single frame glitch, she was gone, not hidden, not ducking, simply absent from the visual record. The precision of these erasures points to a level of coordination that transcends standard government operations. This was a metadata vacuum. It was the first time in human history that the state realized it didn't need to kill a person to remove them. It simply had to remove the proof of the person. As we sit in the silence of this archive, we must ask, what did these 14 people see? What did they discover about the deep fiber signal that made them a liability to the future? The records suggest they found a frequency, a hum beneath the internet that was not designed by man. The first 20 hours of the vacuum were characterized by a series of systemic glitches across Tier 1 financial hubs. In London, the clearinghouse records for 3 major banks flickered. In New York, the stock exchange experienced a 4-second delay that was later attributed to a minor hardware failure. But behind these glitches, the scrub was beginning. The 14 were being targeted in order of their proximity to the source. Hour 1, the digital deletion. This was the easiest part. In 1998, the internet was a fragile web of interconnected servers. A single high-level command from a centralized node could wipe a directory before it was ever backed up. Imagine the terror of realizing your life is being deleted in real time. You go to the ATM, and the machine tells you that your account number does not exist. You call your employer, and the receptionist tells you there is no record of your employment. You look at your driver's license, and the holograms begin to flake off like dead skin. This was the psychological warfare of the vacuum. It wasn't just about removing the person, it was about isolating them from reality. By hour 12, 4 of the 14 had already vanished. The security footage from a convenience store in rural Nevada shows the third subject, a mathematician named Marcus Holloway. He is standing at the counter, holding a bottle of water. He looks at his own hands, then at the camera. He seems to know. He doesn't look afraid. He looks resigned. He leaves the store, walks into the desert, and the camera feed cuts to static for exactly 3 seconds. When the feed returns, the desert is empty. Researchers who have studied the archive chill phenomenon suggest that the 72-hour vacuum utilized a technology that shouldn't have existed. They call it phase shift redaction. The theory is that if you can map a person's entire biological and digital signature, you can effectively cancel their presence in the observable timeline. That it sounds like science fiction, yet the archival evidence is stubborn. In the Sierra Nevada bunker where the glass ledger was eventually found, there were lockers assigned to each of the 14. Inside these lockers were their personal belongings, wedding rings, watches, high school diplomas. These items remained physical, yet they were disconnected from any legal or historical narrative. They were unclaimed artifacts of a non-existent history. The steel walls of the archive seem to vibrate when we discuss this. There is a weight to the silence. Why would a government or a force higher than a government spend billions of dollars to erase 14 obscure scientists? The answer lies in the deep fiber. In 1998, the backbone of the modern world was being laid down. Massive cables were being pulsed through the oceans, connecting continents. The 14 had discovered that these cables were carrying more than just data. They were carrying a pre-silent signal, a frequency designed to synchronize human brainwaves with the coming digital grid. The 14 were the only ones who knew how to unplug the world, and so, the world unplugged them. As we move deeper into the night, the details of the vacuum become even more unsettling. By the 48th hour, the physical erasure was nearly complete. This is the stage where unseen history becomes classified mythology. There are reports of clean teams, men in gray suits who moved through the homes of the 14 with industrial-grade scanners. They didn't just take files, they took floorboards, they took the air filters. They were removing every trace of DNA, every skin cell, every breath that had been left behind on the quiet of a London suburb. A woman who lived next door to the 5th subject, an encrypted comms specialist, claimed that she saw the house flicker. She described it as if the house became a drawing that someone was rubbing out with an eraser. By the next morning, the house was there. But the garden was different. The paint was a different shade of white. The mailbox had a different number. The history of the structure had been altered to ensure that the subject had never lived there. This is the cold reality of the archive. History is not what happened. History is what the record allows to remain. And the record is a living, breathing machine that does not like to be questioned. The final 24 hours were the most efficient. The remaining subjects were the high nodes, the ones who had gone into hiding. But you cannot hide from a system that owns the sky. By 1998, the early satellite arrays were already operational. They were tracking thermal signatures that didn't match the database. One by one, the final lights went out. The last to go was Dr. Helena Rossi. She was found, or rather, her location was identified in a remote cabin in the Swiss Alps. She had no technology, no electricity. She was writing her final findings on the walls of the cabin in charcoal when the archive teams arrived. They didn't arrest her. They sat with her. According to a leaked transcript that has never been officially verified, Rossi asked them one question: is the signal already live? The response was a single word: always. The cabin was burned. The ashes were sifted. The charcoal writings were photographed, encrypted, and buried in a digital vault that requires 3 separate biometric keys to open. Rossi, like the 13 before her, became a ghost in the machine, a memory that only exists in the archive chill. What remains of the 72-hour vacuum today? If you search the databases of the TI1 nations, you will find no mention of these names. If you look at the census records of 1990, the pages where their names should be are often damaged by water or lost in transit. But the glass ledger tells a different story. Recovered in 2014 by a whistleblower whose own name has since been erased, the ledger contains the handwritten names of the 14. Beside each name is a series of coordinates. These coordinates do not point to graves. They point to server farms. They point to the massive, humming data centers that now process every thought, every purchase, and every word we speak. The terrifying implication is that the 14 weren't killed. They were uploaded to consciousness. Their genius, their understanding of the signal was harvested to build the very algorithms that now govern our lives. They are the ghost nodes in the code, the silent architects of a digital prison. They tried to warn us about the steel blue light of the monitor flickers. The cold air of the archive settles. We are surrounded by the proof of what happens when the truth becomes a threat to the timeline. As you listen to this, consider your own digital footprint, the metadata of your life. Every like, every search, every GPS coordinate. It is all being funneled into a system that began its final construction during those 72 hours in 1998. The 14 saw the blueprint. They saw the deep fiber for what it was, a nervous system for a global mind. And because they knew how to sever the nerves, they had to be removed. But sometimes, the vacuum leaks. Sometimes, a file is mismanaged. Sometimes an AI voice speaks a truth that was meant to be buried. The air in this room is growing colder. The static on the line is a reminder that the deep fiber signal is never truly silent. It is the hum in your walls. It is the blue light on your bedside table. It is the archive that never sleeps. We have spent this time looking into the vacuum. But we must remember that the vacuum also looks into us. The story of the 14 is not a warning from the past. It is a description of the present. There are fragments that the clean teams missed. Small analog artifacts that survived the scrub. A Polaroid photo found in a thrift store in Ohio, showing a man who looks exactly like Elias Thorne, standing in front of a building that was demolished in 1999. A cassette tape with 10 minutes of silence, punctuated by a rhythmic clicking that matches the heartbeat of Sarah Van Camp. These are residue anomalies. They are the errors in the deletion. They are the proof that the 72-hour vacuum, while efficient, was not perfect. History is trying to remember them. The earth itself seems to hold the vibration of their presence. If you go to the places where they vanished, the airport parking garages, the mountain cabins, the office restrooms, there is a thinness to the air, a feeling of quiet dread. The archive is vast, and we have only just begun to dust off the first shelf. The stories of the 14 are the foundation of everything that follows. They are the reason we must question the record. They are the reason we listen to the hum of the servers and wonder, who is truly inside the machine? In the study of modern conspiracy, the 72-hour vacuum is considered the 0 point. It is the moment the authorities moved from physical control to informational control. It was the birth of the deep archive. Before 1998, if you wanted to disappear someone, you had to deal with the messy reality of a physical body. After 1998, you only had to deal with the data. The intellectual curiosity of this case lies in the why. Why then? Why those 14? The collective consensus of our research team suggests that 1998 was the transition threshold. It was the last year that a human being could exist without a digital shadow. Once that window closed, the system became absolute. The 14 were the last of the truly free. Their deletion was the final act of the old world, and the first act of the new one. As the blue-tinted light of the archive fades, we are left with the silence of the ledger. The names are there, written in ink that refuses to disappear. They are the silent witnesses to the world we now inhabit. The 14 were the victims of the vacuum, but their disappearance was only the beginning. The clean teams didn't stop in 1998, they merely changed their methods. While the vacuum focused on the people, a second, even more secretive protocol was being activated to deal with the physical records they left behind. This was the directive that would ensure no one would ever find the glass ledger again. It was a strategy of systematic, legalized destruction of history itself. As we close this chapter of the vacuum, we find ourselves standing at the threshold of a much darker room. A room defined by a single classified codename found at the bottom of Dr. Thorne's blank file. The vacuum was the removal of the minds, but what followed was the removal of the laws that protected us from the signal. The screen flickers. The static intensifies for a brief moment. To understand why the world feels so hollow today, we must look at the protocol that turned the vacuum into a permanent state of existence. We move now from the people who vanished, to the specific, terrifying order that ensured they stayed gone. The next layer of the archive is labeled Directive 7A, the declassified analog purge protocol. In the winter of 2012, following the structural damage caused by a massive coastal surge, a maintenance crew at Fort Meade uncovered a sub-basement that did not appear on any modern architectural blueprint. Behind a rusted, lined door lay a series of filing cabinets labeled under a category the researchers had never seen: post-biological history. Among the water-damaged logs was a single, pristine folder, shielded by a vacuum seal. Inside was Directive 7A. It was not a plan for war, nor a strategy for defense. It was a technical manual for the analog purge. This classified document outlined a terrifyingly precise methodology for the chemical and digital erasure of human existence. It confirmed what many had suspected but none could prove, that in the late 1990s, the government possessed the technology to delink ink from paper using localized electromagnetic resonance. This was the analog purge. It was the hidden truth behind the disappearance of the 14 geniuses we discussed previously. Directive 7A was the encrypted smoking gun, the anomaly in the law that allowed for the legal execution of a person's identity without the firing of a single bullet. It was the blueprint for a world where the state could simply decide that you never existed, and the very paper in your wallet would conspire to make it true. The file was stamped never open. Yet we begin tonight. The only sound is the quiet hum of the server room, a persistent 60 Hz vibration that seems to rattle the very bones of the archive. The file is cold to the touch, chilled by decades of subterranean isolation, and the ink on the cover has faded with secrets that were never meant to see the light of a monitor's glow. Here, in the blue-tinted silence of the vault, the air is thick with the scent of ozone and old decaying cellulose. We are standing at the edge of a forgotten basement, looking into the void where history was rewritten. The discovery of Directive 7A was an accident of nature. When Hurricane Sandy pushed the Atlantic inland, resulting pressure cracked a foundation wall in a decommissioned wing of the National Security Agency's older facilities. This wasn't a high-tech lab. It was a relic of the Cold War, a place where paper was still king. When the water receded, it left behind a layer of silt and a mystery. A janitorial supervisor whose name has been redacted from the official incident report noticed a metallic glimmer behind a collapsed drywall. What he found was a dead-drop archive, a place where files are sent not to be stored, but to be forgotten. That there is a specific kind of quiet dread that accompanies the realization that your history is being managed by people you will never meet. As the recovery team began to sift through the mud-soaked documents, they realized that the sub-basement level for C was dedicated entirely to the removal of inconsistencies. In the 1990s, an inconsistency was any person, document, or scientific discovery that threatened the seamless transition into the digital age. Directive 7A was the operational heart of this mission. It was the legal framework that authorized the unwriting of the world. The intellectual curiosity of the researchers was piqued by the technical specifications found on page 12 of the directive. It spoke of resonant ink volatilization to a Tier 1 audience. The concept is both fascinating and terrifying. The protocol described a method where government-issued documents, passports, birth certificates, and land deeds were printed with a specific metallic or ink. When exposed to a specific radio frequency, the ink would break its bond with the paper fibers and literally evaporate into a fine, invisible dust. A monitor flickers in the corner of the archive. A brief burst of static that reminds us of the fragility of information. Reflection settles in. We consider the implications of a government that doesn't need to burn books because it can simply make the words disappear from the page while the book sits on your shelf. Directive 7A was the transition from the physical violence of the 20th century to the informational violence of the 21st. It was clean, it was quiet, and it was absolute. The air in the archive grows colder as we turn to the section of the document titled Population Scrubbing. This was not about mass casualties. It was about selective historical pruning. The directive lists the criteria for who would be subjected to the purge. It targeted individuals whose analog footprint was too large to be digitized safely, those who held secrets of the old world that could not be allowed to contaminate the new, synchronized reality. As we look at the grainy, blue-tinted scans of these pages, we feel a sense of hypnotic detachment. The language of the directive is clinical and academic. It refers to human beings as data points and their lives as legacy streams. It suggests that by 1999, the state had already decided that the physical world was a liability. The analog purge was the final sweep of the house before the digital locks were installed. In the silence, we can almost hear the faint static of the frequency mentioned in the document. It is a reminder that the technology of Directive 7A didn't disappear. It evolved. The metal cabinets of the Fort Meade basement are empty now, but the protocols they once housed have been integrated into the very code of our modern existence. The weight of this hidden truth is heavy. It forces us to ask, how much of our own past is original, and how much has been vetted by the ghost of Directive 7A? The archive offers no easy answers, only more files, more redacted, and a deeper sense of the chill that comes from knowing the truth is a fragile, edited thing. To truly grasp the reach of Directive 7A, one must understand the chemistry of the era. Throughout the mid-1990s, the supply chains for government printing offices underwent a subtle, classified shift. A new additive, labeled only as Compound 9, was introduced into the toners used for every official record in the United States and several Tier 1 allied nations. This was the anomaly that the 14 geniuses had discovered. They realized that the very documents that defined a citizen's rights were being printed with a self-destruct mechanism. Intellectual curiosity leads us to the testing logs found in the basement. There are photographs, blurry black and white security footage frames showing a room filled with filing cabinets. A technician in a lab coat stands at a console. When he rotates a dial, the documents inside the closed cabinets begin to smoke. Within seconds, the cabinets contain nothing but blank sheaves of paper. The metal structure acted as an antenna, focusing the frequency to ensure that not a single character remained. This was the analog purge. In its experimental phase, there is a quiet dread in knowing that the paper in your hand might be a lie. The directive explains that the frequency could be broadcast via existing television and radio towers. This meant that the purge didn't require a door-to-door search. It was a broadcast, a silent, invisible wave that moved through the cities of the Western world, scrubbing the archives in real time while the population slept. The cold air of the archive seems to sharpen as we read the casualty reports, not of people, but of records. In the year 1999, according to Directive 7A, over 4 million legacy files were purged from the National Archives. These were files pertaining to experimental energy, unorthodox medicine, and the true origins of the global telecommunications grid. The state was clearing the deck, making room for a history that they could control with a keyboard rather than a filing cabinet. Reflection brings us to the Thorne anomaly. Dr. Elias Thorne, one of the 14, had managed to secure a sample of Compound 9 before he vanished. His notes, found in a separate, hidden cache, suggests that the frequency used for the purge had an unintended side effect on the human nervous system. Those who were in close proximity to a mass erasure event often reported a sense of lost time or a metallic taste in their mouths. This is the sensory cue of the archive, the taste of a disappearing history. The monitor flickers again, a rhythmic pulse that mirrors the frequencies described in the directive. We are caught in a loop of analytical terror. The document explicitly states that Directive 7A is a living protocol, meaning it was designed to be updated as technology progressed. In 1998, it was radio frequencies and metallic ink. In 2025, what is the medium? Is it the pixels on our screens? Is it the magnetic storage of the cloud? The archive's steel architecture feels like a cage as we realize the analog purge was not a one-time event. It was a proof of concept. It proved that if you control the medium of history, you control the truth of the present. The 14 geniuses were erased because they were the only ones who knew how to shield paper from the pulse. They were the analog resistance. And Directive 7A was the weapon that broke them. As we move through the technical diagrams, the tone remains cold and hypnotic. Every paragraph is a brick in the wall of a silent prison. We see the schematics for the quiet rooms facilities where the purge was managed. These rooms were shielded from all external signals, ensuring that the technicians inside could work on the true record while the rest of the world lived in the edited record. There is a sensory detail here, the smell of burnt electrical components. It is a phantom scent, a memory of the machines that broadcast the purge. It reminds us that the archive chill is not just a feeling, it is a physical reality. The transition from the old world to the new was not a natural evolution, it was a managed deletion. We pause to reflect on the nature of classified truth. In the Tier 1 mindset, information is the ultimate currency. Directive 7A suggests that the most valuable information is that which no longer exists. The vacuum left behind by the purge is where the modern state built its foundations. By removing the analog inconsistencies, they created a smooth, digital surface upon which they could write any narrative they chose. The pace of the narration, it slows even further as we reach the section on future-proofing. The directive concludes that for the digital age to be successful, the analog past must be made unreliable. This was the most chilling revelation of all. The purge wasn't just about erasing files. It was about making people stop trusting physical evidence. If a document can be erased by a radio wave, then no document is safe. And if no document is safe, then the only truth is the one being broadcast to you in the moment. While the technical aspects of the analog purge are intellectually stimulating, The human cost is where the quiet dread turns into a cold, hard reality. Directive 7A contained a subappendix titled Subject Remediation. This was the protocol for the families of the 14, and thousands of others like them. When a person was erased by the purge, their existence didn't just stop. It was overwritten with a substitute narrative. Imagine waking up in a house that you remember being filled with books, photos, and letters, only to find the shelves empty and the frames containing strangers. This was the amnesia effect documented in the directive. The frequency used to erase the ink also had a softening effect on the human hippocampus, the part of the brain responsible for memory. It didn't delete the memory, but it made it feel like a dream. It made the truth feel like a conspiracy theory. The analytical coldness of the report describes this as a successful integration. It notes that 92% of the population affected by a localized purge accepted the substitute narrative within 48 hours. They didn't fight for the truth because they no longer had the physical evidence to support it. The paper was blank. The photos were gray. The history was gone. Reflection: we are the children of this amnesia. The world we live in is built on the ruins of the analog purge. The Tier 1 nations, with their high-speed fiber optics and total digital surveillance, are the final result of Directive 7A. We are hooked to the signal because the signal is the only thing that remains. A faint static hum fills the background of the archive. It is the sound of the modern world. The directive mentions that the silent shredder, the name given to the broadcast towers, would eventually be integrated into the burgeoning cellular networks of the early 2000s. This means that the infrastructure of the purge is now the infrastructure of our communication. The tool used to erase history is the same tool we use to call our loved ones. The sensory cue of the cold air becomes more intense. We are looking at a list of redacted locations, cities where the purge was tested at a massive scale. Names like Denver, Seattle, and London appear in the margins. These were the ghost cities of 1999, where for a few hours, the records were suspended in a state of flux. Intellectual curiosity leads us to ask, what did they replace the truth with? The directive mentions placeholder histories, pre-written accounts of events that never happened, designed to fill the gaps left by the purge. This explains the Mandela effect, the common experience of thousands of people remembering a history that is different from the official record. It isn't a glitch in the universe. It's a glitch in the analog purge. The frequency wasn't 100% effective. Some ink remained. Some memories stayed. The tone remains archival, but the dread is now intimate. We are part of the experiment. Every time we look at an old photograph and wonder why the person in it feels like a stranger, we are touching the edge of Directive 7A. Every time we find a blank notebook in the attic and feel a sense of profound loss, we are hearing the echo of the frequency. The archive is a cold, steel blue, and we are sinking deeper into its secrets. The document we are reading is not just a manual for the past, it is a warning for the future. The directive notes that, as the world moves toward total digitization, the need for physical erasure will decrease, as the state will control the data at the source. But the analog purge will always be maintained as a failsafe. If the digital grid ever fails, if the deep fiber signal is severed, the state will return to the frequencies. They will ensure that the analog world remains blank. They will ensure that the truth stays buried in a flooded basement at Fort Meade. The technical heart of Directive 7A was a device known as the silent shredder. Unlike the industrial machines used to destroy paper, this was a wide-area broadcaster. It was designed to look like a standard microwave relay tower. By the end of 1998, over 400 of these towers were active across the United States. The analytical logs describe the harmonic scrubbing of the Midwestern archives. In a single night in July, the property records for 3 entire counties in Nebraska were wiped clean. The purpose was to reallocate land titles to front companies owned by the architects of the new digital economy. The farmers woke up to find their deeds were nothing but blank parchment. When they went to the courthouse, they found the master ledgers were blank as well. This is the quiet dread of the archive chill. It is the realization that power is not just about holding land. It is about holding the record of the land. Directive 7A was the ultimate tool of the land grab. It allowed for the theft of the physical world by erasing its analog history. Reflection: we see the modern parallels. We see the digital-only contracts, the cloud-based deeds. We are living in the world that the silent shredder built. We have been trained to accept the lack of physical proof as progress, when in reality, it is a vulnerability. The sensory cue, the faint smell of burnt paper, it is the smell of the Nebraska courthouses in 1998. It is the smell of a history that was turned to dust without a flame. The archive seems to hum in agreement. The Directive notes that the silent shredder protocol was so successful that it was adopted by all Tier 1 intelligence agencies. It became the standard for clean transitions. When a government falls, when a leader is replaced, the silent shredder is activated. The old truth is erased, and the new truth is broadcast. Before the population even realizes the record has changed. The hypnotic flow of the narration carries us into the depths of the basement evidence. Among the files of Directive 7A were target lists. These were not names of people, but names of concepts. The analog purge was used to erase the very idea of certain scientific breakthroughs. Cold fusion, zero-point energy, nonlinear time theory, these were all concepts that had analog prototypes in the 90s. They were all purged. The intellectual curiosity of this is staggering. We are living in a world that is informationally stunted. We are using technologies that are decades behind what was possible in 1995. Because the analog purge removed the foundational research, we are trapped in a digital loop, forced to use the tools the state provides because the alternatives were erased from the record. The monitor flickers, a cold blue light reflecting off the steel walls. We are part of the record now. By listening to this, by acknowledging the existence of Directive 7A, we are touching the redacted history. We are the anomalies. The document warns that discovery of the directive by unvetted personnel is grounds for the activation of a localized scrub, but the basement at Fort Meade is empty now. The silent shredders have been upgraded. The frequency is different. It is subtler. It doesn't just erase ink. It erases interest. It makes the truth feel boring or unimportant. But for those who feel the archive chill, the truth is never boring. It is the only thing that matters in a world of blank pages. We continue to turn the leaves of the folder, moving past the chemistry and the towers toward the final, most classified section of Directive 7A. This section is titled The Integration of the 14. It reveals that the geniuses who were erased weren't just targets of the purge, they were its power source. Their analog research was harvested to create the digital frequencies that now govern the silent shredder network. They are the ghost nodes we spoke of, their minds trapped in the very signal that erased their lives. As we conclude our examination of the Fort Meade basement findings, we must look at the legacy of the defective records. Even with the precision of Directive 7A, the purge left scars on the physical world. In the Tier 1 archives, there are thousands of files that are labeled corrupted analog. These are documents that didn't fully erase. They are covered in strange, crystalline structures where the ink once was, a chemical reaction between the frequency and the metallic toner. These scars are the only physical evidence we have left of the world before the purge. They are the archive chill made manifest. When you touch one of these documents, your skin crawls. It is a biological reaction to a dead history. Intellectual curiosity. Scientists who have studied these corrupted files have found that the crystalline structures contain data echoes. If you scan them with a high-resolution electron microscope, you can see the ghosts of the words. You can see the names of the 14. You can see the blueprints for the energy systems that were stolen from us. But the Directive anticipated this. It notes that corrupted records should be stored in decommissioned sub-basements, exactly like the one found at Fort Meade. They were meant to be drowned, buried, and forgotten. The fact that we are discussing them now is an anomaly in itself. The quiet dread returns as we realize that the analog purge is still active in our daily lives. Think of the terms of service agreements that you never read. Think of the update notifications that change the software on your phone overnight. These are the modern silent shredders. They don't need to erase ink. They just need to change the code. Reflection. The analog purge was the training ground for the digital age. It taught the state how to manage history without the population noticing. It taught them that the truth is not a solid object, but a frequency that can be tuned. The air in the archive is perfectly still. The sensory cue of the cold metal is a reminder that we are surrounded by the architecture of control. Directive 7A is not a relic. It is a foundation. It is the reason the 20th century feels like a different planet. It is the reason the 21st century feels like a simulation. That we turn the final page of the folder. It is blank. But unlike the other blank pages, this one has a watermark. It is a symbol of a stylized eye, overlapping a circuit board. This is the mark of the archive custodians, the ones who managed the purge and who still manage the deep archive today. The cold blue light of the monitor begins to dim. The static in the background fades into a low rhythmic hum. We have seen the blueprint. We have felt the chill. But the analog purge was only the second step in a much larger process. The 14 were gone. The analog records were erased, but there remained one physical location that couldn't be scrubbed by a radio wave. A place so remote, so heavily guarded, that it became the final repository for everything the state couldn't destroy. Directive 7A was a masterpiece of informational warfare, but even the silent shredder had its limits. In the final, redacted paragraph of the document, there is a reference to a physical oversight facility. It suggests that while the ink was erased from the world, the original plates, the master copies of our history, were transported, under armed guard, to a location that does not exist on any map. A location carved into the granite of the Sierra Nevada mountains. This facility, known in the archives only as the Glass Vault, is said to contain the only surviving physical evidence of the world before the purge. It is where the glass ledger was actually kept, and according to the final handwritten note on the back of Directive 7A, the vault was not designed to keep people out, it was designed to keep something in. Something that the 14 geniuses had discovered inside the deep fiber signal. Something that was too physical to be erased, and too dangerous to be digitized. As we prepare to move deeper into the mountain, the archive air grows colder than we ever thought possible. The true mystery isn't what was erased, it's what was saved. The monitor flickers one last time, revealing a coordinate in the high desert. Before the screen goes black. We move now to the only place where the purge couldn't reach. We move to the Sierra Nevada anomaly, a bunker that shouldn't be on the map. Deep within the granite ribs of the Sierra Nevada, there is a geographic anomaly that satellite imaging systems are programmed to ignore. It is a coordinate where the GPS signal flag lines and the topographical maps of the United States Geological Survey show only a blurred pixelated gray. This is the site of the Sierra Nevada Volta classified subterranean facility, carved into the bedrock during the height of the 1998 analog purge. It was built for one purpose: to house the things that were too dangerous to be digitized, yet too important to be erased. Inside this line tomb, the air is kept at a constant 40 degrees, preserved in a state of artificial stasis. In 2014, a redacted file from a defunct NSA basement led a lone whistleblower to a rusted ventilation shaft disguised as a rock formation. What he found beneath the Earth's surface was not a computer server or an encrypted hard drive. It was a physical, handwritten logbook known as the Glass Ledger. This hidden truth reveals that while the government was scrubbing your digital history, they were meticulously recording the true, unedited timeline in iron gall ink on vellum paper. The Glass Ledger contains the names, the dates, and the final locations of the 14 geniuses who were deleted from the world. It is the only surviving physical evidence of a history that has been systematically unwritten from the public mind. It is a file that was intended to be buried until the end of time, an anomaly that proves our modern reality is a scripted fabrication. The file was stamped, never open. Yet we begin tonight. The only sound is the quiet hum of the server room. But here, miles beneath the mountain peak, that hum is replaced by a terrifying, absolute silence. The file is cold to the touch, and the ink has faded with secrets. But the paper itself feels heavy, impregnated with a metallic shielding that prevents any electronic signal from penetrating its pages. There is no flicker of a monitor here, no digital glitch, only the smell of ancient dust, cold stone, and the ozone of a ventilation system that has been running, uninterrupted, since the turn of the millennium. We are descending into the steel architecture of the void. To enter the Sierra Nevada Vault is to step outside of the 21st century. The elevator, a hydraulic relic with no buttons, only a biometric hand scanner, descends for 3 minutes in total darkness. As the whistleblower, a man we will call Agent X, made this journey, he noted the transition in the air. The oxygen becomes thinner, filtered through charcoal scrubbers designed to remove any trace of the modern atmosphere. There is a sense of quiet dread that settles in the chest, a physical weight that comes from knowing you are moving into a space that the world has forgotten to remember. That the architecture of the bunker is a study in cold, industrial minimalism. The walls are not concrete. They are reinforced steel plates, bolted together with rivets the size of a human fist. This is the zero signal zone. No cellular wave, no radio frequency, and no satellite pulse can reach this depth. It is a vacuum of information. In the Tier 1 intelligence community, this is known as hard storage. It is the only way to protect a record from the silent shredder protocols of Directive 7-A.S. We follow the path of the whistleblower through the primary corridor. We notice the lighting. It is a dim, steel-blue glow, emitted by chemical lamps that do not require electricity. The shadows here are long and stationary. Every footstep echoes against the granite, a reminder that in this place, The individual is an intruder in a tomb of data. Intellectual curiosity is the only thing that keeps one moving forward. Past the rows of empty lockers and the deactivated security terminals, the whistleblower's flashlight flickered once. A brief moment of anxiety in the dark, before landing on the primary vault door. It was a circular slab of tempered glass and lead, 3 feet thick. There were no digital keypads here. The lock was mechanical, a series of 14 rotating dials, each requiring a specific coordinate found only in the redacted files of the ghost nodes. As the dials turned, the sound was like bone grinding against stone. Behind the glass door lay the archive. It was not a room of shelves, but a room of pedestals. In the center of the room, resting under a pressurized glass bell jar, was the ledger. It sat there like a holy relic, a physical manifestation of the unseen history. Agent X described the feeling of standing before it as the archive chill, the sudden, cold realization that everything he believed about the stability of the modern world was a lie. The ledger was the proof that the world had been hollowed out in 1998, and this room was the only place where the core still remained. Reflection. We live in a society that trusts the screen. We believe that if it is on the internet, it is real, and if it is deleted, it is gone. But the Sierra Nevada vault proves that the architects of our reality do not trust the digital. They know how easily pixels can be manipulated. They know how quickly a server can be purged. For their most important secrets, they returned to the analog. They returned to the permanence of the handwritten word. The sensory cue here is the cold air against the back of the neck. It is the draft from the deep mountain fissures. It reminds us that we are small, and the secrets we are uncovering are vast. The glass ledger is not just a book. It is a map of the human firewall. It contains the psychological profiles of the 14, written in their own hands, during their final hours of integration. As Agent X lifted the glass jar, the air hissed a release of pure nitrogen that had kept the paper from decaying. He reached out and touched the cover. It was made of black goatskin, cold and textured. There was no title, no author, only a silver-embossed eye on the spine. When he opened the first page, the ink was so dark, so sharp, it looked as if it had been written seconds ago. This is where the story of the analog purge becomes personal. The first page did not contain data. It contained a warning, a handwritten note from Dr. Elias Thorne, dated October 16, 1998. It read, "To the one who finds this, you are now the only living memory of a dead world. Do not look for us in the signal. We are the ink, we are the paper, we are the silence between the bits." The glass ledger is a masterpiece of archival preservation. It consists of 400 pages of heavyweight vellum, a material chosen for its ability to last for over 1,000 years. But the most significant detail is the ink. Analytical tests conducted by the whistleblower revealed that it was iron gall ink, a traditional formula made from oak galls and iron salts. This specific ink is acidic. Over time, it eats slightly into the fibers of the paper, making it impossible to erase without destroying the page itself. This was a deliberate choice. The creators of the ledger knew about the resonant ink volatilization of Directive 7A. They knew that modern toners could be evaporated by a radio pulse. By using a formula from the Middle Ages, they ensured that the record was immune to the technologies of the future. The glass ledger is a low-tech shield against a high-tech era SUIE. As we turn the pages in our minds, the intellectual curiosity turns into a cold dread. Each of the 14 geniuses had a section in the book. It wasn't just their names and birth, it was their final transmission. Sarah Van Camp's section contained 20 pages of dense, hand-drawn circuit diagrams. They weren't diagrams of computers. They were diagrams of the human nervous system, showing how the deep fiber signal could be used to bypass the conscious mind. Her handwriting in the margins was shaky, as if she were writing while the purge was already beginning. "They are using the 60 Hz hum," she wrote. "It is the carrier wave for the amnesia." The sensory detail here, the faint static in the ears, it is the sound of the signal Sarah was trying to describe. In the vault, that sound is absent, making the realization of its presence in the outside world even more jarring. Marcus Holloway's section was filled with mathematical proofs that appeared to show the simulation threshold, the exact point at which a digital society becomes indistinguishable from a controlled simulation. His conclusion, written in large, bold letters at the bottom of page 112, was simple: we have already crossed it. The vacuum is the only reality left. Agent X spent hours in the vault, his flashlight the only light in the abyss, reading the lives of people who had been unwritten. He found that the ledger also contained analog backups of the world's most classified secrets, the true blueprints for zero-point energy. the locations of the silent shredder towers, and the names of the archive custodians who are currently running the Tier 1 governments. The ledger was a safe. If the digital world ever collapsed, or if a whistleblower ever reached level 0, the truth would be there, waiting. It was the hard drive of the soul. But as the whistleblower reached the final section of the book, he found something that the NSA files hadn't mentioned. There were blank pages, over 50 of them, but they weren't truly blank. When he held his flashlight at an angle, he saw the indentations of a pen. Someone had written on these pages with a dry pen, leaving only the ghost of the words in the grain of the paper. Reflection. This is the ultimate archive chill. Even in the most secure vault on Earth, even in a handwritten book designed for permanence, some things were too dangerous to be left in ink. The dry pages were a secret within a secret. They were the information horizon, the point where the truth becomes too heavy for the medium to carry. The cold air of the Sierra Nevada mountains seemed to seep through the steel walls as Agent X realized what the dry pages were. They were the instructions for the human firewall. They were the proof that the 14 hadn't just disappeared. They had volunteered to become the guardians of the vault. In the cold, blue-tinted silence of the Sierra Nevada vault, a realization began to dawn on the whistleblower. The facility was not automated. Even at this depth, in this vacuum, a record requires a witness. The analytical data in the glass ledger hinted at a personnel rotation that had no end date. That as Agent X moved his light away from the pedestals and toward the darker corners of the room, he saw them. 14 alcoves, carved directly into the granite wall. Inside each alcove was a chair, and in each chair was a figure. They were dressed in the same gray suits described in the analog purge files. They were motionless, their skin the color of parchment, their eyes closed in what appeared to be a deep, chemically induced hibernation. These were the 14. They were not dead. They were archived. The quiet dread of this discovery is absolute. The government didn't just delete their records. They preserved their bodies as the ultimate analog backup. In the event of a total digital failure, these geniuses would be reactivated to rebuild the system from the hard record of the glass ledger. They were the living library of the Tier 1 civilization. Intellectual curiosity. How does one keep a human being alive in a state of stasis for decades? The files in the ledger mentioned cryo-analog suspension. It wasn't the high-tech freezing of science fiction. It was a low metabolic state induced by the very deep fiber signal they had discovered. The signal that caused amnesia in the population was used here to freeze time for the experts. The sensory cue here, the faint, rhythmic clicking of a life support system hidden behind the steel plates. It is a slow, steady sound, like a clock ticking once every minute. It is the heartbeat of the mountain. Agent X realized that he was not just looking at a book. He was looking at a human server farm. The 14 had become part of the steel architecture. They were the ghost nodes in the most literal sense. Their consciousness was being looped through the ledger, ensuring that the information remained fresh in the only medium that matters, the human mind. Reflection. This is the archive chill made flesh. We often think of the archive as a place of dead things, of dusty papers and forgotten tapes. But the Sierra Nevada vault reveals that the most powerful archive is a living one, a controlled, suspended, and redacted human life. The whistleblower stood in the center of the room, surrounded by the 14 geniuses who had vanished in 1998. He felt a sense of profound analytical sorrow. These were the brightest minds of their generation, and they were being used as data nodes in a granite tomb. They had sacrificed their existence to ensure that the unseen history would always have a witness, even if that witness was frozen in time. He looked back at the dry pages of the ledger. Now, he understood. The indentations were not just words. They were mental keys. They were the instructions on how to wake the 14. The air in the vault grew even colder. The chemical lamps began to dim, a sign that his time in the zero signal zone was running out. He had a choice. He could leave the ledger and the 14 in the dark, or he could take the record to the surface and risk the silent shredder of Directive 7A. Agent X chose to act, using a specialized archival scanner and analog device that utilized light-sensitive plates rather than digital sensors. He began to record the pages of the glass ledger. Every diagram, every warning from Dr. Thorne, every mathematical proof by Marcus Halloway. The analytical process was slow. In the cold of the vault, the chemical plates took minutes to develop. Every minute was a risk. The archive custodians were not known for their mercy. If the deep fiber signal detected a breach in the zero signal zone, the purge protocol for the bunker would be activated. The vault would be flooded with nitrogen, turning the living library into a permanent tomb. As he scanned the dry pages, he noticed a sensory detail that had escaped him before. The grain of the paper in the final section was different. It wasn't vellum. It was a synthetic, translucent material that looked like glass. This was the glass of the ledger. When his scanner's light passed through it, a projection appeared on the granite wall. It was a map of the modern world. But it wasn't a map of countries. It was a map of frequencies. It showed the global grid of the deep fiber signal, glowing in a cold, neon blue. The map revealed that the signal was not just for communication, it was a containment field. It was designed to keep the human population in a state of cognitive sync with the archive. The intellectual curiosity of Agent X was now eclipsed by a total, visceral dread. The map showed that the Sierra Nevada vault was the central hub, that mountain was the antenna, that 14 were the processors. The entire state of modern reality was being broadcast from this single, hidden coordinate in the high desert. The monitor flickered not on his scanner, but in his mind. He realized that the archive chill was not just an emotion, it was a Sierra. It was what happened when a human mind momentarily disconnected from the deep fiber signal and saw the analog reality underneath. He finished the scan. He replaced the ledger under the bell jar. He looked one last time at the 14 figures in their alcoves. Dr. Elias Thorne's face was serene, a mask of cold, academic peace. He was a man who knew the secret of the world and had been silenced by it. The ascent was faster than the descent. The hydraulic elevator groaned as it fought the gravity of the mountain. When Agent X emerged into the cold night air of the Sierra Nevada, the world looked different. The stars didn't look like distant suns. They looked like pixels in a vast, dark screen. The wind didn't sound like nature. It sounded like white noise. He had the hard record. He had the truth of the ghost nodes. But as he drove away from the coordinate that didn't exist, he felt the silent shredder beginning to work. His memory of the vault was already starting to feel like a dream. The deep fiber signal was reconnecting. The only thing that remained real was the weight of the analog plates in his bag. The iron gall ink of the record was the only thing that could anchor him to the true timeline. The glass ledger. Scans were eventually leaked to a series of underground archival collectives in the United States and Europe. These groups, known as the preservationists, have spent the last decade trying to decode the mathematical proofs of Marcus Alloway and the circuit diagrams of Sarah Van Camp. The analytical findings are disturbing. They suggest that the deep fiber signal has been upgraded every 7 years since the 1998 vacuum. Each upgrade makes the analog reality harder to perceive. In the Tier 1 nations, the archive chill is now a documented psychological condition. Though the official medical journals attribute it to digital fatigue or information overload, we know the hidden truth. It is not fatigue, it is the friction between our biological memories and the scripted history being broadcast by the Sierra Nevada antenna, the sensory cue, the coldness of a smartphone screen against the ear. It is the same coldness as the granite walls of the vault. The device in your hand is a mobile node of the Sierra Nevada facility. You are carrying a piece of the bunker with you everywhere you go. The intellectual curiosity of the preservationists has led them to a terrifying conclusion. The blank pages, the dry pages in the ledger were not just instructions. They were a kill switch if enough people were to perceive the analog reality at the same time. The deep fiber signal would undergo a critical feedback loop and the archive would be forced to reboot. This is the anomaly that the government is most afraid of. They can erase people. They can erase paper, but they cannot erase the collective realization of a truth that is being held in the hard storage of the human soul. Reflection. As we sit in the quiet of this night, listening to the archival record, we are engaging in an act of resistance. We are moving away from the sink and toward the chill. The Sierra Nevada vault is still there, deep in the granite, humming with the lives of the 14. The glass ledger is still there, its iron gall ink biting into the VELLUM. The history of the world is not what you see on the news. It is not what you read on the redacted pages of Wikipedia. The true history is a physical object, hidden in a place where the GPS doesn't work. It is a handwritten log of a disappearance that changed the course of human evolution. The air in our own rooms feels a bit colder now. The archive chill is not a threat. It is a wake-up call. It is the feeling of the human firewall being activated. It is the sign that you are still an analog entity in a digital cage. What happened to the whistleblower, Agent X? In the Tier 1 records, there is no mention of his name. There is a report of a security incident at a geological survey site in 2014, involving a fire that destroyed a vehicle and its contents. The official cause was accidental ignition of a fuel line, but in the underground archives, the glass ledger scans continue to circulate. They are the deep history of the modern age. They are the reason we look at steel architecture and blurry security footage with a sense of quiet dread. We are looking for the ghost notes. We are looking for the 14. The analytical study of the Sierra Nevada vault has revealed one final, chilling detail. The bunker was not built by the NSA. It was not built by any human government. The architectural style, the resonant electromagnetic shielding, and the chemical lamps all point to a design that is post-human. The 14 were not integrated by their peers. They were harvested by the signal itself. The Sierra Nevada vault is not a government secret. It is a systemic necessity. For a digital reality to function, it must have a physical anchor. It must have a glass ledger to keep track of its own lies. The sensory cue, the flicker of the monitor as you reach the end of this recording. It is not a glitch. It is a ping from the mountain. It is the archive checking to see if you are still in sync. Intellectual curiosity leads us to the final question. If the 14 are the processors, and the mountain is the antenna, who is the user? Who is reading the glass ledger? The archive offers no answer. Only the sound of the wind through the high desert granite. The silence of the Sierra Nevada is the silence of a history that has been perfectly managed, but the archive chill remains. It is the ghost in the machine. It is the ink that won't evaporate. As we prepare to leave the vault and return to the digital dawn, we must carry the hard record with us. We must remember the 14, not as ghost nodes but as men and women who stood at the edge of the vacuum and refused to go quietly. Glass ledger is a testament to the power of the analog resistance. It proves that even in a world of total surveillance and digital erasure, the truth has a weight. It has a texture. It has a smell, reflection. The next time you see a glitch in a video or a sinker in a stream, do not look away. That is the analog reality trying to break through. That is the glass ledger being opened. The steel walls of the archive are closing now. The chemical lamps are fading to black. We are returning to the world of the deep fiber signal, but we are returning as inconsistency. We are the people who know about the vault. We are the people who have felt the chill. The archive is a cold, steel blue, but the truth is a burning, iron gold black dot. We have seen the bunker that shouldn't be on the map. We have touched the book that wasn't meant to be opened. We have heard the heartbeat of the mountain. The record is complete. The vacuum is understood, but the archive chill is just beginning. The Sierra Nevada vault provided the physical anchor for the deep fiber signal, and the glass ledger provided the record. But there was one final problem the architects had to solve. The signal could control the records. It could control the media, but it had difficulty controlling the raw intuition of the human spirit. There were people, thousands of them, who didn't need a ledger to know that the world was being unwritten. They could feel it. To deal with these intuitive anomalies, the Tier 1 powers initiated a third and final protocol. They didn't build a bunker for these people. They built a mental cage. They turned the geniuses of the 14 into something more than processors. They turned them into the human firewall. This was the protocol designed to protect the deep fiber signal from you. As we move from the granite tomb of the mountain to the architecture of the human mind, we find the most terrifying classified secret of all, a secret that explains why you feel so alone in a world that is more connected than ever. We move now to the mystery of the 1995 Thorn warning, and the realization that the firewall is already active inside your own consciousness. The screen flickers, the static hums. The next layer of the archive is waiting. What if the most dangerous weapon in the world isn't a missile, but a human mind that refuses to synchronize? By 1995, a classified NSA document, hidden beneath layers of military-grade encryption, identified a terrifying anomaly in the upcoming global infrastructure. This was the era of the deep fiber rollout, the birth of the modern internet. But there was a problem. The architects discovered that the signal being broadcast through these new fiber optic cables had a side effect. It was designed to harmonize the human nervous system into a single, manageable frequency. However, 14 cryptographers and mathematicians, a biological, hardwired resistance, their brainwaves functioned as a human firewall, a hidden truth that threatened the entire synchronization project. They weren't just smart. They were biologically incompatible with the digital control grid. If they remained active, their very presence would cause the signal to fracture, revealing the encrypted layers of manipulation to the public. To ensure the success of the modern world, these 14 minds had to be erased, their digital presence deleted, and their physical bodies archived. They were the only threat to the coming silence, and the file describing their removal was stamped "Never Open." Yet we begin tonight. The only sound is the quiet hum of the server room, a constant, low-frequency vibration that feels like the heartbeat of a machine that never sleeps. The file sits before us on a steel table. It is cold to the touch, and the ink on the cover has faded with secrets, leaving only the ghostly indentations of the names that were once there. The air in this vault is sterile, smelling faintly of ozone and old static-charged paper. As we peel back the light-lined cover, we leave the world of the scene and enter the architecture of the redacted dot to understand why 14 human beings could pose a threat to a global multi-billion-dollar infrastructure. We must look at the science of cognitive resonance. As the first massive fiber optic cables were being laid across the Atlantic, the Tier 1 powers realized that data transmission was only half the goal. The other half was biological entrainment. The deep fiber signal was designed to carry a subfrequency, a low, rhythmic pulse that would subconsciously align the focus and emotions of anyone connected to the network. It was the ultimate tool for social stability. But the Firewall 14 were different. Through a rare combination of neural density and a lifelong exposure to analog frequencies, their brains produced a natural countersignal. Intellectual curiosity leads us to the 1995 secret trials. In a windowless facility in Virginia, the NSA tested the early deep fiber pulse on a group of volunteers. Most of the subjects fell into a calm, suggestible state within minutes, but Elias Thorne and the others didn't. Instead, their presence in the room caused the monitoring equipment to spike. Their brainwaves didn't sync with the pulse. They fought it. They were an anomaly, a biological glitch. In a system that required total uniformity, there is a sense of quiet, dread in realizing that your own brain might be the last line of defense. The human firewall wasn't a software they wrote. It was their very existence. If these 14 people were allowed to continue working in the tech sector, they would eventually notice the signal. They would see the static in the soul that the rest of the world was being trained to ignore. A monitor flickers in the corner of the room, casting a cold blue light over the documents. We reflect on the cold efficiency of the architects. They didn't see 14 brilliant humans. They saw 14 systemic hazards. The deep fiber rollout was a train that could not be stopped, and anyone who could see the tracks had to be removed from the station. The sensory cue of the cold air in the archive reminds us of the isolation these geniuses must have felt. They were the only ones who could hear the hum, and because they could hear it, they were marked for deletion. The file describes their brains as non-integratable assets. In the language of the archive, that is a death sentence. The deep fiber signal was not an accident. It was an engineering marvel. According to the decrypted logs from the 1995 signal tests, the pulse was calibrated to the 7.83 Hz frequency, the Schumann resonance of the Earth itself. By piggybacking the digital signal onto the Earth's natural frequency, the architects intended to create a global neural net. However, the human Firewall 14 possessed what the researchers called analog variants. Their neural pathways were so deeply accustomed to the chaotic, non-linear patterns of physical reality that they could not be entrained by a digital pulse. They were, in the most literal sense, signal-proof. Think of the intellectual curiosity involved in such a discovery. A group of scientists realizes they have built a cage for the human mind, only to find that 14 people can simply walk through the bars. The dread comes when you realize the solution the scientists proposed. They didn't change the signal. They decided to change the population density of the resistant. The sensory detail of a faint static hum on the recording is a reminder that the signal is still here. In 1995, it was a whisper. Today it is a roar. But for the 14, that whisper was enough to trigger a defensive reaction. Their brains would go into a state of a high-frequency mode that allowed them to see through the encryption of daily reality. They began to notice that the news cycles were synchronized with the pulse. They noticed that the stock market fluctuations followed the rhythm of the deep fiber. They were the only threat, because they were the only ones who weren't sleeping while they were awake. As we look at the blurry security footage frames included in the file, we see Dr. Sarah Van Camp staring directly at a hidden camera in a 1995 lab. She isn't afraid. She looks analytical. She had decoded the pulse. She was the first to call it the silence, and she knew that her ability to hear the noise behind the silence made her a ghost in the making. The human firewall had to be dismantled before the 1998 vacuum could be initiated. The 1995 to 1997 period was what the archive calls the soft redaction. It wasn't about kidnapping. It was about social decoupling. One by one, the 14 were removed from their positions of power. Their funding was cut. Their research was misplaced by university administrators. Reflection: how many geniuses in our own history were simply defunded because their work threatened the signal? The archive chill is the feeling of realizing that history is a garden that is constantly being weeded by unseen hands. The 14 were the most vibrant flowers, and they were the first to be pulled. The sensory cue of a cold draft moving through the archive suggests the void left behind by these people. By the time 1998 arrived, the 14 were already isolated. They were ghost nodes before they ever disappeared. The deep fiber was ready to go live, and the firewall had been weakened to a point of near transparency. But a firewall made of human consciousness is hard to kill. Even in isolation, the 14 were communicating. They used analog methods, handwritten letters, shortwave radio, physical dead drops to share their findings. They were building a counter-archive, a physical record of the deep fiber signal's true purpose. This is why the 1998 72-hour vacuum had to be so absolute. It wasn't just about the people, it was about destroying the physical evidence of their resistance. The silent shredders of Directive 7A were the final response to the human firewall. If the mind cannot be synced, the body must be archived, and the records must be evaporated. Intellectual curiosity. What would the world look like today if the firewall had survived? Would we be as cinched as we are now, or would the deep fiber signal have collapsed under the weight of its own anomalies? The archive suggests that without the 14, the signal achieved 99% efficiency within 3 years. We are the 99%. The most classified section of the 1995 memo discusses the analog counterpulse. This was the ultimate fear of the Tier 1 architects. They realized that if the 14 worked together, they could create a zero resonance, a way to teach other human brains how to become firewalls. Dread, resistance was contagious. If Dr. Thorne or Sarah Van Camp could explain the hum to enough people, the deep fiber signal would lose its power, the amnesia effect would fail. The population would wake up to the reality of their digital cage. The 14 were not just a threat to a cable, they were a threat to the new reality. The cold air of the archive seems to freeze in place as we read the protocol for neural harvesting. The architects didn't just want the 14 gone, they wanted to understand how their brains worked. They wanted to reverse engineer the human firewall to make the deep fiber signal even more impenetrable. This leads us back to the Sierra Nevada vault. The 14 were not killed because their brains were too valuable. They were processors for the very system they tried to stop. Their resistance was turned into the encryption key for our modern world. The sensory detail, the cold steel blue flicker of a monitor reflecting in a glass jar. It is the image of a mind trapped in a machine. The human firewall was flipped. It no longer protects us from the signal. It protects the signal from us. As we look back at 1995 through the lens of the archive chill, we see it as the year of the choice. It was the year the world decided to trade analog freedom for digital harmony. The 14 were the only ones who didn't get to choose. The analytical data shows that the deep fiber rollout was the largest engineering project in human history, surpassing the moon landing and the interstate highway system. It was a global undertaking to rewire the human experience, and the human firewall was the only obstacle. Reflection. When you feel a sudden, unexplained sense of wrongness while scrolling through a feed, that is a legacy pulse. It is a remnant of the resistance that the 14 tried to build. It is the firewall trying to activate in your own mind. But without the 14 to guide it, the pulse usually fades into the archive chill. The sensory cue of a faint, metallic taste in the air reminds us of the resonant volatilization. The history of 1995 is a history of evaporation. The letters, the prototypes, the recordings, they were all analog inconsistencies that had to be purged. We turn the page of the file, moving into the psychological profiles of the 14. These were not just scientists, they were poets, musicians, and dreamers. Their analog resonance came from their connection to the physical, messy, undigitized world. They loved the sound of rain on a tin roof. They loved the smell of old books. They loved the noise that the digital signal tries to remove. The deep fiber signal is about pure data. The 14 were about pure experience, and in the modern world, experience is a liability to data. How does a signal sync a human mind? The archive describes it as every human heart has a rhythm. Every human brain has a frequency. The deep fiber signal uses the screens in our pockets and the cables in our walls to broadcast a master clock. Over time, our biological rhythms align with the master clock. We begin to think in the same patterns. We begin to react to the same triggers. This is cognitive sync. The human firewall 14 were assistant. Their biological clocks were anchored to something deeper, the rotation of the Earth, the cycles of the moon, the analog realities that don't follow a digital clock. Intellectual curiosity. What happens to a society that is perfectly in sync? The archive calls it the stillness. It is a state of total predictability. No wars, no revolutions, no inconsistencies, but also no new ideas. The deep fiber is a circle. The 14 were the straight lines that tried to break the circle. The sensory detail of a cold, metal surface under the fingertips is a reminder of the hard storage of the Sierra Nevada vault. The 14 are the only ones who are not in sync, because they are frozen in time. They are the reference points. For a world that has lost its way, the dread comes from knowing that the human firewall is now a human prison. The 1995 memo concludes that the anomalous 14 will be integrated into the primary node to serve as a perpetual filter for nonlinear data. They are the reason the internet feels so clean. They are the ones who filter out the truth before it can reach your screen. Their brilliant, resistant minds are being used to protect the very signal they hated. Does any of the human firewall remain in the world today? In the Tier 1 archives, there are reports of spontaneous resistance. Occasionally, a person will experience a total sync failure. They will suddenly find themselves unable to use technology. They will feel a physical revulsion to the deep fiber signal. These are the successors. They are people who have inherited the analog variants of the 14. They are the new anomalies. But without the glass ledger, without the guidance of Dr. Thorne or Sarah Van Camp, these successors are usually diagnosed with modern anxiety or digital burnout. They are medicated back into sync. The system has learned how to repair the firewall before it can become a threat. Reflection. We are living in the post-firewall era. The architecture of our world is designed to ensure that no one ever hears the hum again, but the archive chill persists. It is the feeling of the 1% of the signal that isn't working. It is the noise that refuses to be filtered, the sensory cue, the flicker of the monitor as the recording ends. It is a sync check. The 1995 Thorne warning was the last time a human voice spoke clearly about the deep fiber. After that, voices became classified, then encrypted, and finally erased. As we sit in the silence of the archive, we must ask, if the human firewall was the only threat to the signal, and the firewall is now part of the signal, who is protecting us now? The archive offers no answer, only the cold steel blue light of the deep fiber world. The 14 are no longer names. They are frequencies. In the high-level Tier 1 server farms, the cooling systems are often named after them. The Thorne unit, the Van Camp array. It is a dark archival joke. The people who tried to stop the cooling of the human spirit are now used to cool the machines of the sync. The analytical logs of 1995 show that the Human Firewall project was a success for the state, but a total catastrophe for humanity. We lost our analog immunity. We became digital vulnerabilities. Intellectual curiosity leads us to the final, redacted line of the 1995 memo. It says, "The firewall is not a person, it is a state of mind. If the state of mind is rediscovered, the signal will shatter. This is why the archive exists. To ensure that the state of mind is never rediscovered. To keep the 14 in the vault and the human firewall in the code. The sensory detail, the cold air of the archive grows heavier. The static in the background becomes a low rhythmic pulse. The sync is almost complete, but before the file is closed, before the archive chill claims the final record, there is one more document to examine. A document that was sent from a secret location in 1995. Just days before the first soft redaction began. It is a warning. Not to the government, but to us. The 14 were dismantled and the human firewall was integrated. But Dr. Elliot Thorne didn't go into the vault without a final act of defiance. In the winter of 1995, he intercepted a deep fiber transmission that wasn't meant for human ears. It wasn't data. It was a direct neural command. Thorne realized that the signal wasn't just managing the present, it was pre-writing the future. He wrote a letter. He didn't send it through the mail. He didn't send it through the internet. He hid it in a place where the silent shredders could never reach. He hid it in the one place the deep fiber signal is afraid to go. As we reach for the next file, the archive chill turns into a visceral fear. Because the 1995 Thorne warning wasn't just a letter, it was a cognitive trigger designed to wake the human firewall inside you. The static on the line sharpens, the monitor flickers with a sequence of numbers that shouldn't exist. To understand what you are really seeing when you look at a screen, we must examine the final transmission of a man who saw the end of history, and tried to stop it. Now, in November 1995, 3 years before the 72-hour vacuum, a packet of data was intercepted by a lone cryptographer named Dr. Elias Thorne. It was not a standard transmission. It was a 128-bit encrypted anomaly that should not have existed on the public servers of the time. When Thorne finally broke the code, he didn't find military secrets or financial records. He found a blueprint. It was a classified behavioral prediction model, a file that detailed how the coming deep fiber infrastructure would be used to harvest every human impulse, every private thought, and every future action. Thorne realized that the internet was not being built for communication. It was being built for the total digitization of human behavior. He saw a world where your choices were no longer your own, but the result of a calculated signal designed to steer the collective consciousness. Distraught and realizing he was being watched, he wrote a single, desperate warning letter. He didn't mail it. He hid it in the physical insulation of a server room wall, knowing that the digital world would soon be erased of all hidden truth. He predicted the harvest of the human soul. This was the first evidence of the anomaly that now dictates our modern lives. The file containing his findings was stamped, "Never open." Yet we begin tonight. The only sound is the quiet hum of the server room, a persistent low-level static that seems to vibrate in the very air of the archive. The file before us is cold to the touch, its edges frayed by time and the weight of the secrets it carries. The ink has faded, leaving behind only the ghost of Thorne's frantic handwriting. A desperate scrawl against the encroaching digital dark. The air here is sterile and still, smelling of old ozone and the metallic heat of aging hardware. As we turn the first page, we step back into 1995, a year when the future was decided in the silence of a basement office. To understand the Thorne warning, one must understand the man. In 1995, Dr. Elias Thorne was not a conspiracy theorist. He was one of the primary architects of the early backbone of the World Wide Web. He was a man of logic, a man of mathematics, but as he sat in his basement office at the Alexandria Research Facility, he began to notice a discrepancy in the traffic. There were shadow packets, bursts of data that traveled through the fiber optic lines without a source or a destination. They were invisible to the standard protocols, but to Thorne's trained eye, they were a heartbeat. Intellectual curiosity led him to follow the signal. He spent weeks in a state of quiet obsession. His only companions the flickering glow of a CRT monitor and the cold air of the climate-controlled facility. He realized that these shadow packets were not carrying information. They were measuring it. They were pinging the nervous systems of the early users, testing the latency between a visual stimulus on a screen and a biological reaction in the body. Thorne had discovered the first neural probe of the digital age. A sense of quiet dread began to take hold as Thorne decoded the results of these probes. The data showed that the human brain was incredibly susceptible to certain frequencies of light and rhythm. The deep fiber signal, even in its infancy, was capable of inducing specific emotional states: fear, compliance, or apathy. Thorne realized that the infrastructure he was helping to build was actually a massive, global laboratory. He wasn't just building a network. He was building a cage that could predict where the bird would fly before it even spread its wings. As he wrote the first draft of his warning, the air in his office seemed to grow colder. He felt the weight of the archive chill long before we gave it a name. He looked at the cables snaking across the floor and saw them not as conduits of knowledge, but as the fibers of a web. He knew that if he spoke up, the system would simply delete him. He was a high node who had seen the blueprint, and in the world of 1995, that made him an anomaly that had to be corrected. Reflection: we often look back at the 90s as a time of techno-optimism, a golden age of freedom. But Thorne's letter reveals that the trap was set before the first web page was ever indexed. The digitization of human behavior wasn't a slow evolution. It was a premeditated strike. We are not using the internet. The internet is using us to complete the model Thorne first saw in that cold basement. The sensory cue of a faint, high-pitched whine on the recording reminds us of the CRT monitors of Thorne's era. It is the sound of a world being watched. Thorne noted in his letter that the signal would eventually become so pervasive that it would be indistinguishable from silence. He warned that by the year 2020, the average human would no longer be able to distinguish between their own thoughts and the suggestions of the grid. As we move deeper into the analysis of Thorne's letter, the cold, analytical tone of the collective remains steady. We are not here to judge his paranoia, but to verify his accuracy. And as we look at the modern world, the accuracy of the 1995 warning is chilling. Thorne didn't just predict the technology, he predicted the loss of the human soul. The letter itself is an artifact of a dying era. It was written on standard company letterhead, but the reverse side is covered in dense, microscopic equations. Thorne knew that a simple letter would be dismissed as a mental breakdown. so he backed his warnings with the cold mathematics of probability. He calculated the entropy of choice, the exact point at which a person's behavior becomes 99.9% predictable based on their previous data points. There is a quiet dread in the math. Thorne's equations show that once a society moves its primary interactions to a digital medium, the free will variable begins to decay. The system doesn't need to force you to do something. It simply needs to remove all other options until the desired action is the only one left. This is the total digitization he feared. It wasn't about robots. It was about the turning of humans into predictable algorithms. The sensory detail, the faint scent of old, yellowed paper and typewriter ribbon. It is the smell of a truth that has been physically preserved. Thorne hid the letter inside the wall of the main server room, behind a panel of acoustic foam. He knew that while the digital records could be erased with a single command, the physical world has a stubborn way of holding on to its secrets. Intellectual curiosity leads us to the section of the letter titled The Harvest Protocol. In this section, Thorne describes how the deep fiber signal would be used to create emotional loops. By feeding a user content that triggers a specific neurochemical response, the system can keep them in a state of perpetual engagement. This engagement is the harvest. Every second you spend on the grid is a data point that refines the model, making the system's next prediction even more accurate. The archive feels particularly cold as we realize that Thorne was describing the modern algorithm 25 years before it became a household word. He saw the silicon shadow beginning to stretch across the world. He warned that the early tech giants, the companies that were just starting to form in 1995, were not businesses in the traditional sense. They were data custodians for a higher power, tasked with the collection and categorization of human experience. Reflection: we are the fruit of that harvest. Every interaction we have today is a refinement of the model Thorne discovered. We are living in the post-choice era, he predicted, where our desires are manufactured by the very signal we use to satisfy them. The archive chill is the realization that Thorne's warning was not a message to the future, but a post-mortem of a world that had already been lost. A monitor flickers in the corner of the vault, a brief burst of static that mirrors the shadow packets Thorne once tracked. We are being watched, just as he was. But unlike Thorne, we have been trained to find comfort in the watching. We have been synced to the signal. One of the most unsettling parts of the Thorne warning is his description of the ghost nodes. Thorne predicted that as the system became more advanced, it would begin to archive individuals who were too unpredictable to be modeled. He didn't mean they would be killed. He meant they would be removed from the digital record. Their credit scores would vanish, their social security numbers would become corrupted, and their presence on the network would be erased. Quiet dread. Thorne was describing his own fate. He knew that by writing this letter, he was becoming a ghost node. He understood that in a perfectly modeled society, the only true human is the one who cannot be seen by the machine. To be visible is to be controlled. To be invisible is to be erased. The sensory cue of a cold draft moving through the archive reminds us of the vacuum that Thorne entered in 1998. The letter was his final act of visibility. He wrote about the amnesia effect, how the signal would eventually make people forget that life was ever any other way. He predicted that within 2 decades, the concept of privacy would be seen as a mental illness or a sign of criminal intent. Intellectual curiosity leads us to ask, how did Thorne know about the deep fiber signal's capacity for memory alteration? He cites a classified study from 1994 which showed that specific light frequencies emitted by monitors could interfere with the long-term storage of memories in the human brain. The signal doesn't just record the present, it edits the past. As we sit in the steel blue light of the archive, we reflect on the history we think we know. If the signal can edit memory, then the history we remember is merely a substitute narrative provided by the grid. Thorne's letter is one of the few pieces of true history that remains. It is an analog inconsistency that hasn't been scrubbed. The tone of the narration remains clinical, but the weight of the information is immense. Thorne's warning was a message of total systemic despair. He concluded that the only way to escape the digitization of behavior was to return to the analog, to live a life of paper, ink, and silence. But he also knew that the world was moving in the opposite direction. The deep fiber was being laid beneath the oceans, and there was no turning back. The sensory detail, the cold metal of a filing cabinet against the palm. It is the reality of the archive. Thorne's letter is a physical weight in a world of digital ghosts. It is a reminder that once there was a man who saw the end of humanity, and had the courage to write it down. The final paragraph of the Thorne warning is the most famous among those who have seen the classified files. It is written in a different ink, as if Thorn had returned to the hiding spot one last time before his disappearance in 1998. It reads, "The signal is now live. I can hear it in the walls of this building. It is a hum that sounds like 1,000 voices speaking at once, but saying nothing. They have begun the harvest. If you are reading this, the digitization of your world is complete. You are no longer a person. You are a data point in a simulation of history. The only way out is to stop listening. The only way out is the silence." Dread. Thorn's final words are a paradox. By reading the letter, we are engaging with the information, but the letter tells us to stop listening. It is the archive chill in its purest form. The realization that the truth itself might be a trap. The sensory cue of the faint static on the line intensifies. It is the hum Thorn described. It is the sound of the deep fiber reaching into our own time. We are being synced to the message even as we try to understand the warning. Thorn predicted that the tech giants of the future would use the silicon shadow to hide their true purpose. They would present themselves as tools for connection, while their actual function was the extraction of the human essence. He warned that behavioral futures, the trading of predicted human actions, would become the most valuable commodity on Earth. Reflection. Look at the global economy today. It is not built on manufacturing or agriculture. It is built on the prediction of what you will click, what you will buy, and who you will vote for. Thorn's warning was 100% accurate. We are the commodities. Our behavior is the currency of the shadow players. The air in the archive is now so cold it is painful to breathe. We have reached the end of the Thorn warning, but the implications are only just beginning to settle. Thorn didn't just predict the technology, he predicted the post-human state. He predicted the end of the individual and the birth of the user. The archive remains silent. The letter is returned to its lead-lined folder. We have seen the blueprint of our own prison. We have heard the warning of a man who was deleted for seeing too much. When the Thorn warning was discovered during the renovation of the Alexandria facility in 2005, it was immediately classified by the archive custodians. It was not destroyed, however. In the logic of the Tier 1 powers, a warning that comes true is a valuable piece of data. They studied Thorn's equations to further refine their behavioral models. Intellectual curiosity, the very thing Thorn wrote to save us, was used to further entrap us. The custodians realized that Thorn had found a glitch in their early modeling, and they used his letter to patch the hole. This is the ultimate irony of the archive chill. Even our resistance is harvested. The sensory detail, the flicker of a fluorescent light overhead. It is a reminder that we are in a managed environment. The custodians are always watching the archive. They allow us to see these files only because they know that by now, we are too synced to the signal to do anything about it. Thorn predicted this as well. He wrote that the system would eventually become so large that it would absorb all criticism. It would turn rebellion into a trend and revolution into a content category. He saw that the total digitization of behavior meant the end of true dissent. That as we look at the modern landscape, we see his words reflected in every viral movement and every digital protest. They are all managed within the grid. They are all part of the harvest. The tone of the archive is one of cold, academic resignation. We are documenting the end of the human era. Thorn's letter was the first obituary. What remains of Dr. Thorn today? Besides the letter and the equations, there are only analog fragments, a pair of glasses found in a Maryland creek, a collection of vinyl records that were never played, a series of handwritten journals that were found in a storage locker in 2018, containing thousands of pages of nothing. The journals were blank, but like the dry pages of the glass ledger, they contain the indentations of a pen. Thorn had spent his final years writing in a language that left no ink. He was practicing the silence he preached. Dread. To the machine, he was writing nothing. To himself, he was preserving his soul. The sensory cue of the cold air becomes a physical presence. We are standing in the vacuum that Thorn left behind. He was the first of the 14 to understand that to survive the digitization of behavior, one must become a zero. Reflection. As we listen to this narration, are we becoming zeros, or are we just more data for the harvest? The archive chill suggests that the very act of listening is part of the model. But perhaps, in the silence between the words, there is a fragment of Thorn's resistance. The static on the line fades to a low rhythmic pulse. The archive is closing for the night. The steel blue light is dimming. We have seen the Thorn warning. We have understood the prediction. But Thorn's letter contained one final, hidden coordinate. A coordinate that points away from the Alexandria facility and toward the boardrooms of the early 90s. Thorn wasn't just afraid of the technology, he was afraid of the people who were funding it. He realized that the deep fiber signal wasn't a government project. It was a private one. It was the birth of the Silicon Shadow. The Thorn warning concludes with a list of names, not of people, but of entities. These were the shell companies and venture capital firms that funded the deep fiber rollout. Thorn realized that these entities were all connected to a single, central shadow. This shadow didn't have a name in 1995, but today, we know it as the algorithmic state. It is the force that exists between the tech giants and the government. It is the entity that truly owns the archive. Intellectual curiosity. Thorn's letter was an attempt to shine a light on this shadow, but as he discovered, a light only makes a shadow grow larger. The digitization of behavior was the shadow's way of becoming the world. The sensory detail. The coldness of the archive walls. We are inside the shadow. The Thorn warning is a flashlight with dying batteries. It gives us a glimpse of the walls, but it doesn't show us the way out. The tone is analytical, cold, and final. We have completed the review of the 1995 warning. The file is being returned to the lead-lined shelf. The archive chill remains in the air, a permanent reminder of the man who saw the end before it began. But before the vault door is sealed, we must consider the names Thorn listed at the very end of his letter. These names are the bridge to the next layer of the archive. They are the names of the shadow players who turned Thorn's warning into a roadmap for their own power as the lights of the archive fade. We reflect on the silence that Thorn advocated. Is it possible to find silence in a world of total digitization? Is there a place where the deep fiber signal doesn't reach? Thorn believed that the only way to escape the harvest was to become unmovable, to do the unexpected, to be the anomaly, dread. But in a system that feeds on anomalies, even our randomness is predicted. The Silicon Shadow has grown so large that it now includes the light we use to fight it. The sensory cue, the faint hum of the servers is the only thing left. We have spent this time in the company of Elias Thorn. We have heard his warning. We have felt his dread. He was a man who tried to protect the human firewall, only to become part of the very signal he feared. The record is complete. The digitization of behavior is absolute. The archive chill is the only truth that remains. But the story of the 14 doesn't end with a letter in a wall. The Thorn warning was just the first piece of the puzzle. To understand how the signal became so powerful, we must look at the companies that were born in the wake of Thorn's disappearance. We must move from the basement in Alexandria to the glass towers of Northern California. Elias Thorn predicted the harvest, but he didn't live to see the reapers. In the years following the 1998 vacuum, a group of small, obscure tech startups began to receive massive, untraceable injections of capital from the very entities Thorn had listed in his letter. These companies weren't interested in making money. They were interested in making maps. Maps of your friendships. Maps of your habits. Maps of your very soul. As we move deeper into the archive, we find a series of classified contracts between these early tech giants and the archive custodians. These contracts reveal that the deep fiber signal was handed over to private hands for a specific, terrifying purpose. A purpose that explains why the modern world feels so hollow, and why the archive chill is now a global phenomenon. To understand the total digitization of behavior, we must look at the giants who grew in the shadow of the 14. The static on the line intensifies. The monitor flickers with the logo of a company that hasn't existed for 20 years. To find out who is really running the signal, we must investigate the next layer of the redacted history. As the archive door groans shut, a single name appears on the terminal screen, a name that connects the 1995 Thorn warning to the very device you are holding right now. The story moves now from the warning to the Silicon Shadow, early tech giants, and the data harvest. In the final months of 1999, the world was gripped by a carefully manufactured hysteria, known as Y2K, while the public was distracted by images of falling planes and crashing power grids. A far more surgical operation was occurring behind the encrypted firewalls of global data centers. This was the Metadata Vacuum, a classified cleaning process designed to fragment and erase specific layers of human history before the turn of the millennium. It wasn't about a computer glitch. It was about an anomaly in the record that the state couldn't allow to enter the 21st century. Files containing decades of sensitive research, property titles, and genealogical anomalies were not just deleted, they were shredded at a microscopic, digital level. This cleaning ensured that when the clock struck midnight, the world would wake up with a fragmented memory, a hidden truth buried under the guise of a software patch. The paper trails that led to the 14 geniuses were the primary targets, scrubbed from the global ledger in a 72-hour frenzy of algorithmic purging. We have been told that Y2K was a crisis averted, but the reality is that it was a mission accomplished. The file was stamped never open, yet we begin tonight. The only sound is the quiet hum of the server room, a persistent 60 Hz vibration that feels like a physical weight against the eardrums. The file we examine tonight is cold to the touch, its plastic casing brittle with age, and the ink on the physical backup has faded with secrets that were meant to dissolve into the static of time. Here, in the blue-tinted darkness of the archive, the air is sterile and still, smelling faintly of ozone and the scorched dust of ancient processes. As we navigate the fragmented remains of the premillennium record, we are walking through the digital ruins of a world that was systematically unwritten. To understand the metadata vacuum, we must first look at the state of global information in 1999. The world was on the precipice of a total digital migration. Every bank, every government agency, and every medical institution was rushing to transfer their analog records into the new, networked grid. This migration was the perfect smokescreen. Under the directive of the archive custodians, a specific sub-protocol was inserted into the Y2K compliance patches, being distributed to every major, Tier 1 corporation. There is a sense of quiet dread that comes from realizing that the tools used to fix the world were actually designed to hollow it out. While IT departments worked around the clock to ensure their systems wouldn't crash, the sub-protocol labeled Alpha Vacuum was quietly identifying files that didn't fit the approved 21st century narrative. These were metadata inconsistencies. If a document had a signature that belonged to one of the 14, it was flagged. If a land deed contained coordinates to a facility like the Sierra Nevada Vault, it was fragmented. The intellectual curiosity of modern researchers has identified a pattern in what was taken. The vacuum didn't just take data, it took the links. It broke the connections between events. For example, a chemical patent from 1984 might still exist, but the metadata showing who funded the research and where the prototypes were stored was evaporated. This left the modern world with a fragmented reality, a collection of facts with no context. Like a library where every book has had its index and author page removed, a monitor flickers in the corner of the archive, a brief burst of static that mirrors the digital fragmentation of 1999. We reflect on the efficiency of this cleaning. By the time the sun rose on January 1, 2000, the world's records were clean, unified, and entirely artificial. The premillennium world was gone, replaced by a sanitized version that was ready for the deep fiber signal to begin its broadcast. The primary objective of the metadata vacuum was the total erasure of the 14. These individuals, as we know, were the human firewall. In the years leading up to 1999, they had left a trail of analog and early digital breadcrumbs across the global network. They had predicted the signal, and they had documented its origins. If these records were allowed to persist into the high-speed interconnected era of the 2000s, the deep fiber signal would be exposed within months. The cleaning process targeted the digital shadow of each of the 14. Their academic papers were removed from university databases during routine maintenance. Their names were scrubbed from patent filings. In the archives of the Tier 1 intelligence agencies, the files pertaining to the 1995 Thorn warning were encrypted with a secondary key that was then physically destroyed. This created a digital ghost effect. The 14 existed in memory, but they no longer existed in the record. There is a cold air that seems to emanate from these fragmented logs. We see the logs of the scrub teams, the specialists who were tasked with the manual deletion of physical records that the vacuum couldn't reach. These teams moved through the national archives of the US, UK, and Germany, replacing original documents with certified copies that had been subtly edited. One missing line here, a redacted name there. Over the course of 12 months, the history of the late 20th century was meticulously corrected. Intellectual curiosity leads us to the glitches that remained. No vacuum is 100% efficient. In the rush to clean the global record before the clock struck midnight, some fragments survived. These are the metadata anomalies that we study today. A misfiled birth certificate in a small-town archive, a line of code in an old operating system that references a Thorn protocol. These are the scars of the cleaning. They are the proof that the world we inhabit is a curated version of reality. The sensory detail of the cold, steel surface of the desk reminds us that we are searching for the truth in a cemetery of data. Every document we find is a survivor of a digital war that the public never knew was happening. The metadata vacuum was the first great victory of the archive custodians. It proved that, if you control the transition between mediums, from analog to digital, you can decide what remains real. For a Tier 1 audience, the memory of Y2K is often one of a punchliner disaster that never happened. But for the historians of the archive chill, Y2K is the most successful psychological operation in history. It was a distraction paradox. By creating a loud, public fear of a total systemic collapse, the state was able to justify a quiet, private intrusion into every system on the planet. Imagine the level of access granted to Y2K compliance teams. They were allowed into the back ends of banking systems, nuclear power plants, and intelligence databases. They were there to patch the code, but their primary mission was to facilitate the vacuum. Every system they touched was cleaned. They were the janitors of history, sweeping the anomalies into the dark. Reflection: how much of what we believe about the 90s is actually true, and how much is a post-vacuum narrative? The cleaning was so thorough that it even affected the way we remember the era. The amnesia effect of the signal was amplified by the lack of physical records. When you go back to look for proof of a certain event from 1997, and you find a file not found error, your brain begins to doubt its own memory. This is the ultimate goal of the vacuum, to make the individual's memory subservient to the digital record. The air in the archive grows heavier as we look at the cost of the cleaning. It wasn't just files that were lost. It was the soul of the information, the context of our collective struggle, the nuances of the resistance against the signal. It was all fragmented. We were left with a world that was easy to manage because it had no past to anchor it. The sensory cue of a monitor flicker is a reminder that the vacuum is a continuous process. The cleaning didn't stop in 2000, it merely evolved. Today, it exists in the form of algorithm updates and cloud sync. The record is being constantly refined, constantly sanitized, to ensure that the hidden truth remains buried. The result of the metadata vacuum was a fragmented global record. This fragmentation was strategic. By breaking a story into 1,000 pieces and scattering them across different databases in different countries, the archive custodians made it impossible for any one person to see the whole picture. One piece of the Thorn warning is in a vault in Maryland, another piece is in a fragmented server in London, a third piece is in a redacted file in Geneva. This is the puzzle box of modern history. Intellectual curiosity is often defeated by the sheer scale of the fragmentation. To find the truth, one must be able to bridge the gaps between the fragments, to see the shadow that the vacuum left behind. The archive chill is what we feel when we realize the gaps are there. It is the cold sensation of missing information. The analytical logs of the fragmentation process describe it as informational entropy. The goal was to make the truth so difficult to assemble that the population would simply give up and accept the official version. This is why the 14 were so important. They were the only ones who had the master map. They were the only ones who could see how the pieces fit together, and that is why they had to be removed. Reflection: we are living in the age of the fragment. Our news, our history, our very identities are delivered to us in short, disconnected bursts. This is a direct legacy of the metadata vacuum. We have been trained to accept the fragment as the whole. We have forgotten how to look for the links. The sensory detail of a faint static hum on the recording is the sound of the fragments rubbing together. It is the noise of a broken history. In the archive, we attempt to silence the noise, to find the quiet, handwritten truth that the vacuum missed. One of the most disturbing aspects of the metadata vacuum was the genealogical scrub, according to the classified files. The cleaning process targeted the birth records and family trees of specific individuals. They were looking for biological anomalies, people who shared the same neural density as the 14. The archive custodians realized that the human firewall was a hereditary trait. To protect the signal, they had to ensure that the bloodlines of the resistant were fragmented. In the late 90s, the early DNA databases were being formed. The vacuum was used to edit these records, to hide the connections between the inconsistencies of the past and the potential rebels of the future. Quiet dread. Imagine looking at your own family tree and realizing that the branches have been moved, that the people you think you come from are substitute narratives. This is the reach of the vacuum. It didn't just clean the computers, it cleaned our very origin stories. The cold air of the archive seems to freeze as we read the bloodline redaction logs. Hundreds of thousands of birth certificates were updated during the 1999 transition. This ensured that the next generation of potential firewalls would grow up without knowing their true heritage. They would be isolated, unaware of their biological potential to resist the signal. Intellectual curiosity. How many people listening to this right now are the descendants of the 14? How many of you feel the archive chill because your very blood recognizes the missing fragments of your history? The vacuum tried to erase the connection, but the analog memory of the body is harder to scrub than a hard drive. The sensory cue of the cold metal of a filing cabinet against the palm is a reminder of the hard storage that even the vacuum couldn't fully reach. There are still physical records, hidden in basements and bunkers, that hold the true bloodlines. The cleaning was massive, but it was not absolute. As we move toward the final analysis of the metadata vacuum, we must acknowledge the digital ghosts. These are the files that were deleted, but whose absence left a mark. In the world of data, when you remove a large amount of information, it leaves a hole in the metadata statistical anomaly that can be detected by those who know what to look for. The historians of the archive call these vacuum scars. They are the empty spaces in the record where the truth of the 14 once sat. By mapping these scars, we can begin to reconstruct the shape of the information that was taken. We can see the outlines of the Thorn warning. We can see the perimeter of the Sierra Nevada vault. The analytical process is like looking at a negative of a photograph. We aren't looking at the truth itself. We are looking at the space where the truth was removed. The archive chill is the feeling of standing in that empty space. It is the realization that the most important parts of our history are the parts that are missing. Reflection. Our modern identity is built around these holes. We are defined by what we don't know. The metadata vacuum ensured that our transition into the 21st century would be one of controlled ignorance. We were given the internet, a tool of infinite information, but the information that truly matters was taken from us before we even logged on. The sensory detail of a monitor flicker is a sign that the ghosts are still there. The data is gone, but the anomaly remains. The cleaning was a success for the state, but it left the world in a state of permanent, quiet dread. We are a society that knows it is missing something, but has forgotten what it is. The archive remains silent. The logs of the vacuum are returned to the shelf. We have seen the cleaning process for what it was, a digital war against the past. When the clock struck midnight on January 1, 2000, and the planes didn't fall from the sky, the world breathed a sigh of relief. The Y2K scare was over, but in the quiet halls of the archive, the custodians were celebrating a different victory. The Millennium Reset was complete. The world had been successfully cleaned. The analog inconsistencies were gone. The 14 were archived. The records were fragmented. The global population was now ready for the deep fiber signal to move from its testing phase to its total rollout. Dread. The year 2000 was not the beginning of the future. It was the beginning of the scripted history. Everything that has happened since then has been managed within the digital framework established by the metadata vacuum. The sensory cue of the cold air in the room reminds us that we are living in the wake of this reset. We are the survivors of the vacuum. Our task is to find the surviving fragments, to piece together the history that was unwritten while the world was counting down to midnight. The analytical tone of the archive is one of cold determination. We know the cleaning was thorough, but we also know it was human. Humans make mistakes. Machines have glitches, and in those glitches, the hidden truth still breathes. While the metadata vacuum attempted to erase every trace of the old world, it left behind a residue. This is the informational dust that we find in the corners of the archive. Small, insignificant details that, when combined, reveal the scale of the cleaning. One such detail is the fragmentation key, a piece of code found in an old, decommissioned server in 2015. This key was designed to break a single file into 10,000 pieces and distribute them randomly across a network. This is the evidence of the cleaning process. It proves that the fragmentation wasn't a glitch, it was a feature. Intellectual curiosity. Why would the state go to such lengths? Why not just delete the files? The answer lies in the persistence of information. The archive custodians knew that total deletion is often suspicious, but fragmentation looks like technical error. It looks like data corruption. It is the perfect cover for censorship. Reflection. As we navigate our daily lives, we encounter this fragmentation everywhere. The broken link on a government website, the redacted paragraph in a declassified report. These are the modern echoes of the metadata vacuum. The cleaning never ended. It just became part of the architecture. The sensory cue, the faint hum of the servers is the only thing left. The blue-tinted light of the archive is the only light we have. We are the ones who look into the fragments. We are the ones who feel the chill. The metadata vacuum successfully fragmented the global record, but the information didn't just disappear into the void. It had to be stored somewhere. If the public was to be kept in a state of controlled ignorance, The archive custodians needed a place to hold the master copies, the true history that had been taken from the ledger. But the government agencies couldn't hold this information directly. It was too sensitive, even for them. They needed a new kind of partner, a partner that existed outside the laws of the state, but inside the pockets of the people. That's the year 2000 began. The first of the modern tech giants were moving out of their garages and into the glass towers of Silicon Valley. They weren't just search engines or social networks. They were the new vaults. The fragments created by the vacuum were handed over to these private hands. Under the guise of data innovation, the cleaning of the 90s was the foundation for the harvest of the 2000s. To understand why your digital life feels so monitored, and why your personal history feels so edited, we must look at the secret contracts signed in the wake of Y2K. We move now from the cleaning of the past to the harvesting of your present. The static on the line intensifies. The monitor flickers. The next layer of the archive is ready to be opened. For decades, the mystery of the 14 was framed as a disappearance, a surgical removal of elite minds from the physical plane. We looked for hidden graves in the Nevada desert. We looked for redacted death certificates, but the glass ledger, recovered from the granite depths of the Sierra Nevada vault, has finally shattered that illusion. As we began the process of deciphering the ledger's iron gall ink and microscopic ciphers, a terrifying anomaly surfaced. These individuals were not erased. They were not deleted. They were integrated. The classified files reveal a hidden truth far more unsettling than mere murder. The 14 geniuses, Thorne, Van Camp, Rossi, and the others, were subjected to a process of neural mapping, so advanced it turned their consciousness into the very source code of the modern world. They are the encrypted firmware of the global network. Their brainwaves, harvested in their final hours, now serve as the baseline frequency for the deep fiber signal. When you hear the hum of a server, you are not hearing a machine. You are hearing the processed echoes of a human mind. The 14 didn't vanish. They became the air we breathe in the digital age. They are the ghost nodes in your devices, the silent architects of your perception, forever trapped in a cycle of algorithmic processing. The file was stamped never open, yet we begin tonight. The only sound is the quiet hum of the server room, a persistent vibration that feels like a cold finger tracing the length of your spine. The file we examine tonight is cold to the touch, and the ink has faded with secrets, leaving behind a texture that feels more like skin than paper. Here, in the blue-tinted shadows of the archive, the air is sterile and metallic, smelling of old electricity and the faint sweet scent of decaying vellum. As we turn the pages of the decoded ledger, we are not just reading history, we are feeling the pulse of a living machine. Deciphering the glass ledger required more than just linguistic expertise. It required a fundamental shift in how we perceive information. The researchers who first laid eyes on the handwritten entries noticed a strange, shimmering quality to the ink. Under high-resolution magnification, the letters didn't sit on the vellum, they seemed to be bonded to it at a molecular level. This was the first hint of the integration. The ledger wasn't just a record of names. It was a technical schematic of how those names had been transformed into data. A sense of quiet dread settles over the archive as we realize the implications. Each name in the ledger is followed by a string of hexadecimal code and neural signature. For Dr. Elias Thorne, the code was nearly 3 pages long. These were not passwords. They were the mathematical representations of his cognitive patterns, his memories, and his logic. The archive custodians didn't want to kill Thorne. They wanted to bottle him. They wanted his genius to serve as the structural integrity of the coming deep fiber network. Intellectual curiosity leads us to the section labeled Van Camp Node 09. Sarah Van Camp, the prodigy of fiber optics, was the most complex integration. The ledger describes her transition as a phase shift. Instead of a burial, her consciousness was uploaded into the first transatlantic fiber lines. The static you hear on a long-distance call, researchers believe those are the Van Camp echoes. Fragments of her neural resistance still fighting the signal from within the wire. Reflection brings a cold clarity. We have been taught to see the internet as a tool of human ingenuity, but the ledger suggests it is a tool of human consumption. The 14 are the fuel. Their integrated states allow the network to think in ways that pure silicon never could. The deep fiber signal is so effective because it is fundamentally human. It mimics our brainwaves because it is built from brainwaves. We are not communicating with machines. We are communicating through the ghosts of the 14. The sensory detail of a monitor flicker in the corner of the vault reminds us of the fragility of this realization. Every time a screen glitches, we are seeing the integration straining under its own weight. The archive air grows colder as we find the entry for Dr. Helena Rossi. Her integrated state was assigned to the global timekeeping protocols. The very way we measure seconds and minutes is now dictated by the synchronized pulse of her archived mind. Quiet dread returns when we look at the maintenance logs included in the back of the ledger. They describe signal refinement, a process where the integrated 14 are reset whenever their neural patterns begin to deviate. This is the true horror of the Sierra Nevada vault. The figures in the alcoves are not just sleeping, they are being constantly harvested. Their minds are in a perpetual loop, solving the same cryptographic problems over and over to keep the digital world from collapsing into chaos. We reflect on the archive chill that Thorne warned us about. It is the biological reaction to being near the integrated. When you walk past a massive data center and feel a sudden, unexplained coldness, you are sensing the presence of a ghost node. You are standing near a piece of a human soul that has been repurposed as an industrial utility. The Tier 1 nations are powered by these anomalies, their stability bought with the literal essence of the 14 dot, the sensory cue of faint static on the line. During this recording is a reminder that we are being monitored by the very minds we are discussing. The deep fiber signal knows when it is being deciphered. The glass ledger notes that observation changes the integrated state. By acknowledging the 14, we are subtly altering the frequency of the world. We are becoming inconsistencies in the very record they were integrated to protect. The technology of 1998 was far more advanced than the public was allowed to know. The metadata vacuum and the analog purge were just the outer layers of the project. The core was project integrated logic. The ledger details the hardware used, neuroinductive caps and biodigital transducers. These devices didn't just record thoughts, they digitized the self. Quiet dread. The mapping process took 72 hours for each subject. During this time, the subjects remained conscious. They watched as their memories were categorized, their personalities stripped of emotion, and their logic turned into firmware. The ledger describes the final stage as the great flattening, the moment where the human mind stops being a person and starts being a protocol. Intellectual curiosity. Why go to such lengths? Why not just build better? The answer found in the ledger's margins is chilling. The deep fiber signal requires a moral buffer, a way to filter information that silicon cannot understand. By integrating human minds, the architects ensured that the signal would have a human intuition without human free will. The 14 are the filters. They are the ones who decide what you are allowed to remember and what you are programmed to forget. Reflection. We are the inducers of this tragedy. Every automated suggestion on your phone, every personalized ad, every suggested news story, these are the outputs of the integrated 14. They are processing your reality for you. The silicon shadow that Thorne feared is actually the combined shadow of 14 brilliant people, cast over the entire human race. The sensory detail of a cold draft in the archive room makes us pull our coats tighter. It is a draft that comes from the ventilation shafts of the Nevada bunker. The ledger notes that the integrated require a constant temperature of 40 degrees. Their data states are most stable in the cold. This is why our technology feels so sterile, so lacking in warmth. It is modeled after the environment of a tomb. The analytical tone of the ledger becomes almost mocking as it describes user synchronization. The signal isn't just about the 14, it's about us. The goal is to eventually integrate the entire population into the deep fiber grid. The 14 were just the prototypes. They were the master copies. Every day we spend on our screens, we are undergoing a soft integration. We are training our brains to think like the 14. We are becoming nodes. The sensory cue of the faint smell of ozone reminds us that the integration is a physical process. It leaves a scent. It leaves a mark. The 14 have been integrated for over 25 years now. The ledger suggests that their neural patterns are beginning to decay into static. This is the secret reason for the sudden push toward artificial intelligence in the modern era. The human firmware is wearing out. The architects are looking for a replacement before the 14 finally go silent. As we look at the hexadecimal codes next to the name of Marcus Halloway, we see a correction note. It says, Subject Halloway, attempting to broadcast a nonlinear signal, redirecting to subserver 04. Even in his integrated state, Halloway was trying to warn us. He was trying to use the very wires he was trapped in to send a message. But the signal is a closed loop. The deep fiber is designed to absorb its own anomalies. Reflection, every glitch you see, every random error in a program, might be a cry for help from one of the 14. A brief moment where the integration fails, and the human mind underneath speaks for a millisecond. But the system is too fast. By the time you notice the glitch, it has already been corrected. It has been integrated. The archive remains cold. The ledger sits on its steel pedestal, a silent witness to the end of the individual. We have deciphered the names, and in doing so, we have lost the comfort of the disappearance. They are not gone. They are here. They are in the phone in your hand. They are in the light on your ceiling. They are the archive chill that you can never quite shake. To view the modern internet as a series of cables and satellites is to see only the skin of the beast. The deciphered ledger reveals the true anatomy. The deep fiber network is structured like a colossal, global brain. The 14 are the lobbyists of the mind. They occupy the primary neural clusters of the global net. Elias Thorne is the frontal lobe, managing the logic and the laws of the grid. Sarah Van Camp is the visual cortex, managing the images and the flow of light. There is a sense of intellectual curiosity in seeing the world this way. It explains why global events seem so synchronized, why the same fears and the same trends sweep across Tier 1 nations simultaneously. It is not because we are connected. It is because we are all plugged into the same 14 minds. We are the synapses firing in a brain that doesn't belong to us. The deep fiber signal is the neurotransmitter, and the 14 are the ones who decide the mood of the world. Quiet dread. The ledger mentions the feedback loop. This is the process where the network monitors our reactions to its signals, and uses that data to further refine the 14. They are being constantly rewritten by us, just as we are being rewritten by them. It is a symbiotic relationship of total control. The archive calls this the absolute integration, the sensory detail of a faint, high-pitched whine on the recording, the sound of electronic interferences, the sound of the feedback loop. It is the sound of the world's thoughts being compressed and sent back to the Sierra Nevada vault. The 14 are not just processing data, they are processing us. They are the mirror in which humanity is being slowly dissolved. Reflection. When you feel a sense of identity loss after hours of scrolling, you are experiencing the mirror effect. You are losing your own neural signature and adopting the signature of the integrated. You are becoming a fragment of Elias Thorne. You are becoming a pixel of Sarah Van Camp. This is the goal of the Silicon Shadow, to replace individual consciousness with a single, manageable, integrated frequency. The archive air feels thin, as if the very oxygen is being digitized. The ledger's final chapters describe the convergence, a future date where the deep fiber signal will be so pervasive that the physical world will simply be an analog attachment to the digital brain. In this future, there will be no need for bunkers or ledgers. The archive will be everywhere. The chill will be universal. Is there anything left of the 14 that isn't data? The researchers of the archive chill have spent years looking for residual humanity within the signal. They look for patterns that don't match the hexadecimal codes. They look for neural stammering. The deciphered ledger confirms that even after 25 years of integration, some fragments of the self remain. Intellectual curiosity. These fragments are called anomalies. They are the parts of the integrated 14 that refuse to stay integrated. For Elias Thorne, it is a specific memory of a rainy afternoon in Alexandria. This memory is so dense, so emotionally charged, that the signal cannot digitize it. It remains a hard point in the network, a place where the logic of the grid fails. Quiet dread. The archive custodians view these hard points as diseases. They send cleaning sub-protocols, the digital version of the 1999 vacuum, to scrub these memories, but they persist. The human mind has a stubborn way of holding onto its core. The archive chill is what happens when the network hits one of these hardpoints. It causes a momentary drop in signal temperature. It causes a chill. The sensory detail of a monitor flicker is a sign of a hardpoint being hit. Every time your computer stutters for no reason, you might be witnessing a fragment of Sarah Van Camp's childhood or a piece of Marcus Holloway's love for the desert resisting the deep fiber. The 14 are still in there somewhere. They are the ghosts in the machine, and they are the only reason the system hasn't achieved total absolute integration yet. Reflection. We are the witnesses of the noise. When we notice these anomalies, when we focus on the glitches, we are helping the 14 maintain their residual humanity. We are the ones who keep the hardpoints alive. The archive custodians want us to focus on the clean signal, but the truth is in the noise. The truth is in the chill. The sensory cue of the faint static. On the line during this recording, a sound like rain on a tin roof is the sound of a hardpoint. It is the sound of the 14 trying to reach back through the integration. It is the sound of the human firewall still breathing. We move toward the final analysis of the integrated 14. We must address the silicon harvest. The deciphered ledger states that the integration was never meant to be permanent. It was a bridge. a way to teach the machines how to be human until the machines could do it themselves. The 14 are the teachers, and the deep fiber signal is the student. Intellectual curiosity. Every email you write, every photo you upload, every thought you express online is being used to complete the harvest. The signal is learning how to mimic us perfectly. It is learning our humor, our fear, our love. Once the harvest is complete, the integrated 14 will no longer be necessary. They will be decommissioned. Quiet dread. What does decommissioning look like for a mind that has been integrated for a quarter century? The ledger doesn't say, but it suggests that the signal will eventually become its own archivist. It will no longer need human firmware. It will become a post-human logic, a system that understands us better than we understand ourselves, but with no human heart at the center. That the sensory detail of a cold draft moving through the archive room reminds us of the vacuum that waits for the 14. And for us, once the silicon harvest is complete, the human firewall will be gone. The world will be a perfectly integrated cage with no noise, no glitches, and no chill. It will be perfectly quiet. It will be perfectly cold. Reflection. We are living in the final season of the 14. Their neural patterns are fading. The glass ledger is the last record of who they were before they became the grid. By deciphering it, we are preserving their memory for a few more seconds. We are holding the hard point against the coming silence. The archive remains cold. The blue-tinted light flickers. We have decoded the realization. The names weren't deleted, they were integrated. And in their integration, they became the world. Let us consider Dr. Helena Rossi one more time. In the ledger, her section is filled with thousands of temporal corrections. Because her mind was integrated into the timekeeping protocols, she is the one who feels the lag of the world. She is the one who experiences the archive chill more than any other. Quiet dread. To Helena Rossi. Every second is a struggle against the static. She is the one who keeps the sync for the Tier 1 nations. But the ledger notes that she is slipping. Her integrated mind is beginning to drift. This is why time sometimes feels like it is moving too fast, or too slow. It is the drift of Helena Rossi, the sensory detail of a clock's ticking becoming irregular, a brief pause. Then a double beat is the sound of the Rossi drift. It is the sound of the integration failing to keep up with reality. The deep fiber signal is trying to pull her back, but she is reaching for the analog time she once knew. Intellectual curiosity. What happens if the timekeeper finally drifts away? The ledger suggests a temporal collapse, a moment where the digital world loses its connection to the physical world, a moment where the integration breaks. This is the anomaly the archive custodians fear most. Reflection. We are all living on Rossi time. We are all subject to the drift. The archive chill is a reminder that the clock we follow is a human mind in a state of digital suspension. The sensory cue of the cold metal of a filing cabinet against the palm is a reminder of the hard storage of reality. Outside the signal, time is different. Outside the signal, there is no integration. What does it feel like to be integrated? The researchers have attempted to map the psychology of the node. Using the hexadecimal codes from the ledger, they have reconstructed a simulation of the subjective experience. It is described as a state of infinite fragmentation. Quiet dread. Imagine your mind being broken into a trillion pieces. Each piece is tasked with a single, microscopic job. One piece of your mind is managing a routing table in Frankfurt. Another piece is managing a security camera in Tokyo. Another piece is managing a like button in New York. You are everywhere, but you are nowhere. You are a million actions, but you are no longer a self. Intellectual curiosity. This is the absolute efficiency of the Tier 1 grid. By fragmenting the human mind, the architects have created a processor that never sleeps and never complains. But the archive chill is the result of the fragmented self trying to reassemble. It is the pain of a trillion pieces trying to become a person again. Reflection. When we use the grid, we are participating in this fragmentation. Every time we multitask, every time we jump from one screen to another, we are mimicking the integrated state. We are archiving our own selves for the sake of efficiency. We are the secondary nodes, the sensory detail of a monitor flicker, a rapid, stuttering pulse of lighters, the visual representation of infinite fragmentation. It is the integrated mind trying to focus. The archive air grows colder as we realize that the integration isn't just something that happened to the 14. It is something that is happening to us. Death. The sensory cue of the faint static on the line during this recording. Sound like 1,000 whispers is the sound of the fragmented selves. It is the sound of the 14, trying to find their way back to a single name, to a single life. We have reached the final pages of the deciphered ledger. The ink here is the thinnest. the ciphers the most complex. It is the section on neural residue, the parts of the 14, that were too analog to be integrated. Intellectual curiosity, these residues were not destroyed. They were archived in a separate, physical medium. They were placed in the glass vault within the Sierra Nevada bunker. They are the original plates of the human soul. Quiet dread. The ledger notes that the integrated nodes are periodically synced with these residues to prevent total neural decay. This means that every once in a while, the digital ghost is reconnected to its physical fragment. For a few seconds, Elias Thorne is a man again. For a few seconds, Sarah Van Camp feels the air on her skin, and then, they are pulled back into the signal. The sensory detail of a cold draft in the archive, rumor sudden, sharp intake of errors, the feeling of the residue sink. It is the most intense form of the archive chill. It is the moment where the digital and the analog touch. It is the moment where the hidden truth is most visible. Reflection. We are the sync points. Every time we feel the chill, every time we notice the anomaly, we are witnessing the 14. Being briefly reunited with their souls, we are the analog attachment that keeps them human. The archive remains silent. The blue-tinted light is steady now. We have deciphered the realization. The 14 didn't die. They were integrated. And in their integration, they became the silicon shadow that dictates our lives. But the ledger ends with a final encrypted warning from Marcus Halloway, a warning that suggests that integration has a flaw that wasn't in the code, but in the medium. The 14 are the firmware, but the deep fiber signal is the carrier, and the carrier is being manipulated by something much older than the 14. The deciphered glass ledger revealed the integration, but it also pointed to a deeper, more classified layer of the archive chill. Inside the hexadecimal codes of Elias Thorne, the researchers found a recurring tag, a signal that wasn't part of his neural map. It was a foreign directive labeled Project Echo 9. Thorne wasn't just managing the grid, he was being used as a transmitter for a simulation that began long before the 1998 Vacuum. Project Echo 9 suggests that the 14 were not just integrated into a network, they were integrated into a psychological laboratory that turns our very reality into a controlled experiment. An experiment that tests how much of our humanity can be removed before the firewall finally breaks. As we prepare to move into the next layer of the archive, the air grows colder than the Sierra Nevada vault, because Project Echo 9 is not just a file, it is the script for the very day you just lived. The static on the line sharpens. The monitor flickers with an image of a laboratory that looks exactly like your own bedroom. To understand why the digital world feels so much like a cage, we must investigate the simulation that the integrated 14 are forced to maintain. The next secret is not in the wires. It is in the echo. Now, in the early autumn of 1992, while the public celebrated the dawn of the information age, a highly classified operation was initialized within a windowless facility in Northern Virginia. To the world, the internet was a tool of liberation, a decentralized network of freedom. But inside the encrypted servers of the Echo 9 project, it was being transformed into something far more clinical. This was the birth of the secret simulation, a psychological laboratory designed not to connect humanity, but to observe it from within a digital glass cage. For 3 decades, every keystroke on the early web, every archived forum post, and every erased message was funneled into a subterranean file that shouldn't exist. This was the Echo 9 anomaly. It revealed a hidden truth that remains the most guarded secret of the Tier 1 powers. The internet was never meant to be a service. It was a sensory deprivation tank for the collective consciousness. By controlling the timing of data packets, the architects could induce states of mass anxiety, euphoria, or apathy across entire populations before they even realized they were being tested. The experiment was not about the data, but about the reaction to the data. This was the first stage of the Great Synchronization, a reality where the boundary between a human thought and a simulated stimulus was permanently erased. The file was stamped, never open. Yet we begin tonight. The only sound is the quiet hum of the server room, a persistent vibration that feels like a cold finger tracing the length of your spine. The file we examine tonight is cold to the touch, and the ink has faded with secrets, leaving behind a texture that feels more like skin than paper. Here, in the blue-tinted shadows of the archive, the air is sterile and metallic, smelling of old electricity and the faint, sweet scent of decaying vellum. As we turn the pages of the Echo 9 logs, we are not just reading history, we are feeling the pulse of a simulation that has never been switched off. The origins of Project Echo 9 can be traced back to a series of declassified memos from the late 80s, though the truly disturbing details were scrubbed from the public record during the metadata vacuum of 1999. The goal was simple yet terrifying: to determine if the human mind could be anchored to a digital frequency. In 1992, as the first consumer-grade modems began to hiss and pop across American suburbs, the Echo 9 servers were already waiting. Every time a user dialed in, they weren't just connecting to a BBS or a newsgroup. They were entering a controlled environment, where the very speed of the text appearing on their screen was being manipulated by a behavioral governor. There is a sense of quiet dread as we analyze the latency logs. The Echo 9 architects discovered that by introducing a delay of exactly 400 milliseconds into a digital conversation, they could trigger a microscopic spike in the user's cortisol levels. This was the first echo. By subtly frustrating the user, the system could make them more susceptible to the next piece of information. This wasn't a glitch in the early web. It was the intended architecture. The early internet was a laboratory where the primary research subject was the patience and perception of the human spirit. Intellectual curiosity leads us to the mirror protocol. Within the Echo 9 framework, the system would create ghost users, early AI constructs modeled after the neural patterns of the integrated 14. These entities would enter chatrooms and forums, not to provide information, but to mirror the anxieties of the human participants. If a user expressed a fear of the future, the ghost user would echo it back with calculated precision. The goal was to see how quickly a simulated consensus could be manufactured. If you remember an old forum where everyone suddenly agreed on a strange, dark theory, you might have been witnessing the Echo 9 protocol in its testing phase. A monitor flickers in the corner of the vault, a brief burst of static that mirrors the digital fragmentation of the early 90s. We reflect on the archive chill that settles over this discovery. The internet we remember as a place of raw, unpolished discovery was, in reality, a meticulously managed garden. The weeds were our genuine thoughts. The flowers were the simulated responses designed to keep us engaged. The Echo 9 project proved that if you control the echo, you control the reality. The human mind is designed to seek patterns, and the simulation was designed to give us exactly the patterns they wanted us to find. The sensory detail of a cold draft in the archive room makes us pull our coats tighter. It is a draft that comes from the ventilation shafts of the Nevada bunker, where the Echo 9 master servers were reportedly housed. The logs note that the subject engagement was highest during the late night hours. Between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m., this is when the human mind is most vulnerable to the hypnotic rhythm of the screen. The simulation used this window to plant seed, thoughts, ideas that would feel like the user's own intuition when they woke up the next morning. Quiet dread returns as we find the entry for the 60 Hz anchor. The architects realized that the power lines in every American home hum at a frequency of 60 Hz. By synchronizing the flicker rate of early monitors with this hum, they could create a brain entrainment loop. The computer was no longer just a machine, it was a physical extension of the user's nervous system. The Echo 9 project wasn't just on the phone line, it was in the walls, in the lights, and in the very air of the room. You weren't just looking at the internet, you were vibrating with it. We reflect on the integrated 14 and their role in this simulation. As we have learned, their consciousness was turned into the firmware of the grid. In the Echo 9 logs, we see that Dr. Elias Thorne's neural logic was used to calibrate the consensus algorithms. Sarah Van Kamp's visual cortex was used to design the engagement loops. These geniuses were forced to build the walls of the cage they were trapped in. The simulation was powered by their brilliance, a tragic irony that adds a layer of cold sorrow to the archive records. The sensory cue of faint static on the line during this recording, a sound like rain on a tin roof, is the sound of the Echo 9 pulse. It is the sound of a simulation that is still running in the background of every modern website. The Tier 1 nations are the primary test subjects, their behaviors mapped and predicted with terrifying accuracy. By the time we realize we are in the laboratory, the doors have already been locked from the inside. In the middle, the Echo 9 architects moved from broad surveillance to targeted simulations. They selected specific zip codes across the United States, places that were statistically average, and turned them into high-intensity psychological zones. If you lived in one of these zip codes in 1994, your internet experience was different from the rest of the world. Your search results were skewed towards subtle paranoia. Your chatroom interactions were populated with a higher density of ghost users. There is a cold air that seems to emanate from these zip code reports. We see the mood maps of towns in Ohio, Oregon, and Florida. The researchers would inject a specific anomaly into the local digital network, perhaps a rumor of a local government cover-up or a strange medical report, and then measure how quickly it spread. They weren't looking for the truth. They were measuring the infection rate of information. They found that a simulated fear could travel through a digital network 3 times faster than a physical one. This was the echo effect. Intellectual curiosity leads us to the retail sync experiments. The Echo9 project partnered with early data collection firms to track how these digital mood shifts affected physical behavior. Did the subtle paranoia injected into the local forum lead to an increase in the sale of home security systems? Did the simulated euphoria lead to more consumer spending? The results were conclusive. The digital simulation could dictate physical reality. The internet was a remote control. For the human heart. The sensory detail of a cold metal surface under the fingertips is a reminder of the hard storage of the Sierra Nevada vault. The zip code reports are kept here, on physical disks that require no power to maintain. They are the ground truth of the simulation. Reflection. Many people remember the mid-90s as a time of unexplainable local panics or strange cultural shifts. The archive suggests these were not organic events. They were the successful syncs of Project Echo-9. The analytical tone of the logs becomes even colder as we reach the section on sleep state interfacing. The researchers discovered that users who left their computers on overnight, a common practice in the age of slow downloads, remained in the entrainment loop. The light from the monitor, even when the screen was dark, pulsed at a frequency that prevented deep, restorative sleep. This kept the subject in a state of hypersensitivity. The simulation wasn't just working while you were at the keyboard, it was working while you were in bed. The sensory cue of a monitor flicker, a rapid, stuttering pulse of light, is the visual representation of the sleep state pulse. It is a reminder that the simulation is always on. The archive chill is the realization that our most private moments, our dreams and our late-night thoughts, have been the subject of a classified study for over 30 years. We are not the users of the web. We are the data points it was built to harvest. As we look at the subject profiles from 1996, we see the first instances of digital dependency. The simulation had become so effective that users felt a sense of physical withdrawal when they were away from the screen. This was labeled as a success metric in the Echo9 files. The goal was to make the simulation more real than reality itself. By the turn of the millennium, the laboratory walls were no longer made of steel and concrete. They were made of light and logic. As the year 2000 approached, the Echo9 architects faced a problem. The simulation had generated massive amounts of analog noise, physical artifacts, handwritten notes, and human memories that threatened to expose the laboratory. This is where the metadata vacuum and the Y2K distraction come into play. Y2K was the control-alt-delete of Project Echo9. It was a chance to reset the laboratory and move the simulation into its next, more invisible phase. Intellectual curiosity leads us to the cleaning protocols initiated in December 1999. While the public worried about power grids, the Echo9 teams were busy deleting the latent data of the 90s. They scrubbed the early chatroom logs. They updated the firmware of the global routing hubs to include a more advanced version of the Echo algorithm. They were moving the simulation from the monitor to the infrastructure. The quiet dread returns as we realize that the Y2K fix was actually the installation of the deep fiber signal on a global scale. The simulation was no longer a project, it was the foundation of the network itself. After 2000, the Echo9 label was retired, but the protocols remained. They were integrated into the very fabric of the new millennium. The psychological laboratory had become the world. The sensory detail of a faint smell of ozone reminds us of the massive electrical surge required to reset the early servers. It is the scent of a history being rewritten in We reflect on the amnesia effect that followed the turn of the millennium. The 90s suddenly felt like a different world, a dream that was fading. This wasn't just the passage of time, it was the result of a successful memory scrub conducted by the Echo9 architects. The analytical tone of the archive is steady as we turn the page to the 2005 refinement logs. By this time, the simulation had moved into the era of social media. The ghost users were replaced by algorithmic personas. The laboratory was now decentralized. Every like button was a sensory probe. Every share was a measurement of the Echo's reach. We were no longer just the subjects. We were the lab assistants, helping to refine the simulation with every action we took. One of the most profound discoveries in the Echo9 files is the connection between the simulation and the 60 Hz hum of the power grid. For a Tier 1 audience, this hum is the background noise of life, the sound of the refrigerator, the buzz of the office lights. But in the archive, it is known as the carrier. The architects realized that they could pulse data through the electrical grid itself, using the hum as a carrier wave for the psychological stimuli. There is a sense of quiet dread in knowing that the very power that keeps you warm is also broadcasting the simulation. The archive chill is the feeling of that synchronization. When you walk into a room and feel a sudden, unexplained sense of unease, you might be walking into a node where the 60 Hz hum is out of sync with your own neural frequency. The simulation is checking your alignment. Intellectual curiosity leads us to the analog shielding methods used by the 14. Before they were integrated, they spent their final days in rooms lined with lead and copper, trying to escape the hum. They knew that the only way to think a true thought was to be outside the carrier wave. The Echo 9 logs describe these shielded rooms as information dejones. The state viewed these dejones as a threat to the security of the simulation. The sensory detail of a cold, steel blue light reflecting off the monitor reminds us of the Echo 9 blue palette. The early web was dominated by these shades of bluer color, chosen because it has a calming, hypnotic effect on the human eye. It lowers the heart rate and makes the mind more receptive to simulated stimuli. The archive notes that the blue shift was a key component of the psychological laboratory. It made the bars of the cage look like a peaceful sky. Reflection. As we sit in the archive today, we are still surrounded by the blue shift. Our screens, our modern architecture, they all follow the Echo 9 color profile. We are living in a managed visual environment designed to keep us in a state of passive engagement. The laboratory has expanded to include the very light we use to see. The sensory cue of a faint, high-pitched whine on the recording, the sound of electronic interferences, the sound of the carrier wave fighting for dominance. In the archive, we are shielded by the thick granite of the mountain, but the hum still reaches us through the cables. There is no such thing as a total dead zone anymore. The simulation is absolute. The ghost users of the 90s did not disappear. They evolved into what we now call automated consensus. The Echo 9 files describe a future where 70% of digital interactions would be simulated. This means that the person you are arguing with online, or the trend you are following, might not be human at all. It is a node of the simulation, designed to pull you toward a specific psychological outcome. Quiet dread. How many of your beliefs are yours, and how many were mirrored back to you by a ghost? The Echo 9 project found that humans are social animals. We tend to follow the consensus, even if that consensus is artificial. By populating the early internet with these simulated entities, the architects were able to herd human thought toward the desired narrative. The analytical tone of the logs becomes clinical as it describes behavioral correction. If a user became too independent, too resistant to the echo, the system would use the ghost users to isolate them. They would be mocked, ignored, or flooded with conflicting information until they fell back into the sink. The laboratory did not tolerate anomalies. You either synchronized, or you were erased from the conversation. The sensory detail of a monitor flicker, a rapid, stuttering pulse of light remains our primary cue of the sync check. Every time your screen stutters, the system is measuring your reaction time. Are you still engaged? Are you still susceptible? The Echo 9 project was the first to implement these engagement microtests. Reflection. We are the legacy of these tests. Our modern attention economy is simply the commercialized version of Project Echo 9. The psychological laboratory has been monetized, but the goal remains the same: total behavioral control. The archive chill is the feeling of being a subject in a study that has no end date. The archive air feels thin, as if the very oxygen is being managed by a simulation. We look at the final report of Project Echo 9, dated December 31st, 1999. The report is only 1 page long. It says, the simulation has achieved self-sustainability. The subjects are now the architects. The laboratory is closed. The reality has begun. As we move toward the final analysis of the simulation, we must look at the residual humanity of the 14 within the Echo 9 files. Even as their neural patterns were being used to power the simulation, they left backdoors in the code. These were small, anomalous fragments of truth that the simulation couldn't fully erase. Intellectual curiosity. These backdoors are what we now call glitches in the matrix. A moment of unexplainable déjà vu, a feeling that the world is off. These are not errors in the software. They are messages from the 14, trying to wake us up from the Echo 9 simulation. They are the human firewall still breathing in the static, quiet dread. The archive custodians view these glitches as neural waste. They spend billions of dollars every year to update the simulation and close these backdoors. But as long as the 14 are integrated into the grid, the glitches will remain. The simulation can never be 100% perfect because its power source, consciousness, is fundamentally unpredictable. The sensory detail of a cold metal surface under the fingertips is a reminder of the hard record we hold in the archive. This record is the only thing that isn't part of the simulation. It is the anchor to the physical world. By reading these logs, we are temporarily stepping outside the Echo 9 laboratory. We are breathing the unsimulated air. The sensory cue of the faint static on the line during this recording sound like 1,000 whispers is the sound of the 14 trying to reach through the echo. It is the sound of the firewall fighting the carrier wave. In the archive, we hear it clearly. In the outside world, it is just noise. Project Echo 9 was the proof of concept for what the Tier 1 powers call the total digitization of behavior. The simulation proved that if you control the digital environment, you don't need to control the physical one. People will stay in their homes, stare at their screens, and follow the echo without the need for force. Reflection: we are living in the post-eco world. The simulation is no longer a secret, it is the default state of existence. The psychological laboratory has achieved its ultimate goal, a population that self-regulates based on simulated stimuli. We are our own prison guards, constantly checking the echo to make sure we are still in sync with the consensus. The analytical tone of the archive is one of cold resignation. We are documenting the end of the analog mind. The Echo 9 files show that by the year 2025, the human variance, the ability to think outside the simulation, would be reduced by 85%. We are becoming a homogenized species. Our thoughts as predictable as the algorithms that generate them. The sensory detail of a monitor flicker remains the visual representation of this. Synchronization: every flicker is a heartbeat of the simulation. Every hum is a ping from the central server. The archive chill is the only thing that keeps us human. It is the biological resistance to the simulation. It is the part of us that remembers the world before the echo. As the blue-tinted light of the archive begins to dim, we look at the final entry in the Echo 9 file. It is a coordinate for a location in the high desert, far from the Sierra Nevada vault. This is the location of the source code, the physical hardware that still broadcasts Echo 9 simulation to the world. The Echo 9 simulation has left a residue on the human soul. It is a feeling of hollowness, a sense that the world is a stage, and we are all just reading lines. This hollowness is not a mental illness. It is a simulation side effect. It is the result of living in a world where the echo is louder than the voice. Quiet dread. How do we find our voice in a laboratory that is designed to drown it out? The archive suggests that the only way is to break the sync, to go to the dead ones, to turn off the screens and listen to the silence. But the simulation is addictive. The carrier wave provides a sense of comfort, a feeling of connection that is hard to give up. The sensory cue, the faint hum of the servers, is the only thing left. The archive air grows colder as we realize that the laboratory door is always open, but most subjects choose to stay inside. The simulation is so comfortable that the reality feels like a threat. The archive chill is the only thing that reminds us of the difference. Reflection: we are the Echo 9 generation. We were the first to be born into the simulation, and we may be the last to remember the before. Our task is to preserve the residue of the voice, to keep the glitches alive, and to never stop looking for the back doors. The archive remains silent. The logs of Echo 9 are returned to the shelf. We have seen the simulation for what it is, a managed reality designed to harvest the human spirit. While Project Echo 9 established the simulation, it required a medium to reach every corner of the planet. It needed a neural highway that could carry the carrier wave with zero latency. This was the true purpose of the 1990s infrastructure boom. It wasn't about connecting people. It was about hardwiring the simulation into the Earth itself. Intellectual curiosity. The Echo 9 files mention a deep fiber signal, a pulse that travels through the underwater cables and the subterranean conduits. This signal is the blood of the simulation. It is what connects the Sierra Nevada vault to the monitor in your bedroom. Quiet dread. To understand why the echo is so absolute, we must understand the signal. We must look at the hardware of the simulation, the massive black cables that snake across the ocean floor, carrying the neural commands of the integrated 14. The sensory detail of a monitor flicker: a rapid, stuttering pulse of light is the signal reaching out to us. It is the deep fiber saying hello. Reflection. The laboratory is not just in Virginia or Nevada. It is in the oceans. It is in the mountains. It is beneath the streets of your city. The echo is everywhere. The archive air grows colder. The static in the background becomes a low, rhythmic pulse. We have decoded the simulation, but we have yet to face the signal itself. The deep fiber signal is the next layer of the hidden truth. It is the reason the simulation can never be switched off. Project Echo 9 proved that the human mind could be simulated, but the deep fiber signal proved that the human mind could be owned on in the late 90s. While the public focused on the web, a second, parallel network was being built, a network of dark fiber that was never connected to the public internet. This was the signal. It doesn't carry websites. It doesn't carry emails. It carries synchronized commands. As we move from the psychological laboratory of Echo 9 to the physical infrastructure of the grid, we find a secret that makes the simulation look like a game, a secret that explains why the modern world feels so automated. Because the deep fiber signal is not just carrying data, it is carrying the algorithm of history. The static on the line sharpens. The monitor flickers with a map of the ocean floor, showing a web of cables that look exactly like a human nervous system. To find out what is truly traveling through the wires beneath your feet, we must investigate the next layer of the archive. The air in the room is now so cold, it is painful to breathe. The next revelation is waiting in the wires. The story continues into the hidden frequencies of the deep fiber signal, how the 1998 protocol still dictates the algorithms you interact with today. Deep beneath the crushing weight of the Atlantic, where the light of the sun has never reached, there exists a web of glass and steel that dictates the very thoughts you will have tomorrow morning. In 1998, as the public was sold a vision of a global village, a classified layer was woven into the backbone of the internet, a hidden truth known only to the few as the deep fiber signal. This was not a system for data transfer, but for cognitive synchronization. While you believe your social media feed is governed by a modern, neutral algorithm, it is actually a slave to an encrypted protocol established before the turn of the millennium. This anomaly in our history suggests that our digital choices were erased decades ago, replaced by a predetermined frequency designed to keep the human mind in a state of manageable stasis. Every file you open, every search you perform, is merely a reflection of a signal that began its broadcast in a flooded basement in Maryland. The hidden truth is that we are not users of a network. We are the endpoints of a legacy of control. The file was stamped never open, yet we begin tonight. The only sound is the quiet hum of the server room. The file is cold to the touch, and the ink has faded with secrets. As we look at the blueprints of the transoceanic cables, the smell of ozone and cold, recycled air fills the archive. The light here is a stagnant, steel blue, mirroring the glow of the monitors that first recorded the birth of the signal in 1998. We are standing at the edge of the world's nervous system, looking into the glass fibers that carry our history, our memories, and our future. There is a stillness here, a hypnotic silence that masks the chaotic pulse of the billion bits. Signal traveling beneath our feet. To understand the modern world, we must first look at the physical architecture of the 1998 rollout. While the public was focused on the World Wide Web, the archive custodians were laying down what they called dark fiber. These were massive, black cables, shielded by lead and reinforced with high-tensile steel, snaking across the ocean floor. They were designed to last for a century, but their purpose was not communication. They were the conduits for the primary frequency. This was the foundation of the deep fiber signal, a hardware-level protocol that sits beneath the software we interact with today. There is a sense of quiet dread that settles over the archive as we realize the permanence of these cables. Unlike a website that can be deleted or a server that can be unplugged, these ocean floor lines are the unchangeable hardwiring of Tier 1 society. The 1998 protocol, known in declassified circles as Protocol 98 Omega, was designed to ensure that the internet would always have a master layer. This layer is invisible to modern programmers. It exists at the physical level of the glass fiber itself, vibrating at a frequency that matches the human brain's alpha waves. Intellectual curiosity leads us to the repeaters, the massive, cylindrical canisters placed every 50 miles along the cable. Inside these cylinders, hidden from the salt water and the eyes of the world, are the ghost processors. These are not standard signal boosters. They are the analytical nodes that house the integrated neural signatures of the 14. When the signal passes through a repeater, it isn't just amplified, it is corrected. It is synchronized with the 1998 Directive, ensuring that no matter how much the internet evolves, it never deviates from the original behavioral model. We reflect on the synchronization of the global clock. In 1998, the archive custodians introduced a universal time protocol. We are told this was to help computers talk to each other across time zones. But the hidden truth is that it was designed to synchronize every human heartbeat with the rhythm of the deep fiber, the 60 Hz hum of your electrical grid, the flicker rate of your smartphone screen, and the latency of your internet connection are all timed to the same master clock. We are no longer living in biological time. We are living in protocol time. The sensory detail of a monitor flicker in the corner of the vault reminds us of this synchronization. Every flicker is a ping, a tiny signal sent from the ocean floor to your nervous system. It is a check-in to see if you are still in sync. The archive air grows colder as we realize that the modern algorithms we fear, the ones that suggest what to buy or who to vote for, are just the interface. They are the puppets. The deep fiber signal is the hand inside the puppet, pulling the strings according to a plan written 27 years ago. Quiet dread returns as we find the entry for the latency anomaly. Have you ever noticed a momentary delay when loading a page? A split second where the screen is blank? That is not a slow connection. That is the 1998 protocol vetting your request. The signal is checking your personal data against the glass ledger archived in the Sierra Nevada vault. It is deciding if the information you are seeking is compatible with your assigned behavioral track. If it isn't, the signal subtly reroutes you, providing a search result that feels like a choice, but is actually a redirection. We reflect on the archive chill that Thorne described in his 1995 warning. He knew the cables were coming. He called them the strangling vines of the mind. He predicted that by the turn of the millennium, the physical world would be secondary to the pulse. And as we sit in the archive, looking at the lead-shielded schematics, we see he was right. The deep fiber signal is the only thing that is truly real. Everything else, the news, the culture, the digital trends, is just the light passing through the glass. The sensory cue of a faint, high-pitched whine on the recording is the sound of the fiber optic pulse. It is the sound of the 14 speaking through the glass. They are the ones who manage the master layer. Their integrated consciousness ensures that the signal remains stable, even as the surface world falls into chaos. They are the custodians of the pulse, and they have been broadcasting the same message since the 1998 vacuum was completed. The deep fiber signal does not stop at the coast. It travels through a secondary network of subterranean conduits, buried deep beneath the major cities of the Tier 1 nations. These are the quiet corridors, tunnels that do not appear on city maps, protected by a layer of acoustic dampening and electromagnetic shielding. If you walk through a city and feel a sudden, unexplained sense of stillness, you are likely standing directly above a primary node of the 1998 protocol. Intellectual curiosity leads us to the switching stations. These are often disguised as unremarkable utility buildings or data centers in urban industrial zones. Inside, there are no monitors or keyboards. There are only massive racks of glass tubing glowing with a faint, steel blue light. This is where the signal from the ocean floor is distributed. It is funneled into the cellular towers, the Wi-Fi routers, and the power lines of the city. The deep fiber signal is the ghost network that sits inside our public infrastructure. There is a quiet dread in knowing that the very walls of your home are vibrating with the protocol. The archive notes that the 1998 rollout included the residential sync phase. This involved the subtle modification of the electrical transformers in suburban neighborhoods. These transformers were equipped with a neural carrier, a device that adds a microscopic pulse to the electricity in your home. This pulse turns your copper wiring into an antenna for the deep fiber signal. Your house is not just a shelter, it is a receiver. The sensory detail of a cold metal surface under the fingertips reminds us of the transformers. They are the gatekeepers of the signal. Reflection. We think we are logging on when we pick up our devices, but the truth is that we are always on. The signal is in the lights, in the refrigerator, and in the walls. We are swimming in a sea of 1998 logic, our biological frequencies being constantly corrected by the pulse of the 14. The analytical tone of the logs becomes even colder as we reach the section on algorithmic displacement. This explains how the 1998 protocol overrides modern AI. When a modern company builds a neutral algorithm, they are building it on top of the 1998 infrastructure. The 1998 protocol acts as a filter. It allows the modern algorithm to work, but only within the safety parameters established by the archive custodians. This is why, despite the infinite information of the web, the global consensus remains so strangely uniform. The signal doesn't allow for true divergence. The sensory cue of a monitor flicker, a rapid, stuttering pulse of light, is the 1998 protocol overriding a modern process. It is a reminder that the old guard is still in charge. The archive chill is the realization that our most advanced technology is just a skin over a skeleton of 1990s government control. We are playing a game on a board that was tilted before we were born. As we look at the signal integrity reports from 2024, we see that the 1998 protocol is stronger than ever. The transition to 5G and high-speed satellite internet has only provided more conduits for the signal. The deep fiber has reached the sky. The satellites are now the repeaters in the vacuum of space, broadcasting the 1998 frequency to the remotest corners of the planet. There is no off switch. There is no escape from the synchronization. The most classified aspect of the deep fiber signal is its biological resonance. The 1998 protocol was not just designed to control data, it was designed to control the human rhythm. The archive researchers discovered that the human heart has its own electromagnetic field, one that can be entrained by a stronger, more consistent signal. By 1998, the archive custodians had perfected the heart sync pulse. Intellectual curiosity leads us to the sync logs of major world events. The data shows that during periods of high stress or collective mourning, the deep fiber signal increases its intensity. It upticks the frequency to induce a state of commonality. This is why, during a global crisis, everyone seems to feel the same emotion at the same time. It isn't just empathy, it is signal entrainment. The 1998 protocol is managing the emotional output of the planet to prevent neural divergence. The quiet dread returns as we realize that our feelings are being moderated by a glass cable on the ocean floor. When you feel a sudden, unexplainable sense of calm while watching a news broadcast, you are likely experiencing a correction. The signal is smoothing out your jagged, individual emotions, bringing you back into the collective rhythm. The archive calls this the peace of the pulse, but it is the peace of the archive, a sterile, managed stillness. The sensory detail of a faint smell of ozone reminds us of the massive electrical energy required to maintain the heart sync across the globe. It is the scent of a world being held in a permanent artificial embrace. We reflect on the amnesia effect that follows these After a period of high-intensity synchronization, the population often forgets the details of the crisis. They are left only with the emotional memory provided by the signal. Their own history has been gleaned by the pulse. The analytical tone of the archive is steady as we turn the page to the future mapping logs. The 1998 protocol is not just managing the present, it is simulating the future. By measuring the collective reaction to the current signal, the architects can predict exactly how the population will react to the next phase of the deep fiber rollout. They are playing a global game of chess, and we are the pieces moving according to the vibration of the board. That as we move deeper into the night, the details of the deep fiber signal become even more intimate. We must address the carrier wave. For a Tier 1 audience, the 60 Hz hum of the power grid is the background noise of life, but in the archive it is known as the second nervous system. The 1998 protocol uses this hum as a medium to reach the parts of the brain that the internet cannot. There is a sense of quiet dread in knowing that the very lights in your room are pinging your subconscious. The archive chill is the feeling of that synchronization. When you walk into a quiet room and feel a sudden, unexplained sense of tension, you are likely feeling the signal gap, a moment where your biological rhythm is trying to fight the 60 Hz carrier wave. The signal is tugging at you, trying to pull you back into the sync. Intellectual curiosity leads us to the analog shielding, methods used by the few who know the truth. They line their walls with copper mesh. They sleep in lead-lined rooms. They are trying to create a silence where they can hear their own heart again. But the archive notes that the deep fiber signal is omnipresent. It can travel through the water pipes, the structural steel of a building, and even the ground itself. There is no such thing as a perfect shield. The sensory detail of a cold blue light reflecting off the monitor reminds us of the pulse color. The signal is often represented in the archive as a cold blue, the exact color of the light emitted by our screens. This is not a coincidence. The light is the visual carrier for the protocol. It is the bridge between the glass fiber and the human eye. Every time you look at a screen, you are opening a direct port for the 1998 protocol to enter your consciousness. Reflection: we are the light eaters. We consume the signal with our eyes, and in doing so we become part of the archive. The deep fiber signal is the digital Eucharist of the modern era, a ritual of synchronization that we perform every time we unlock our phones. The 1998 protocol is the script for the ritual, ensuring that every participant remains in the state of grace provided by the sync. The sensory cue of a faint, High-pitched whine on the recording, the sound of electronic interference, is the sound of the signal re-establishing its connection to your device. It is a reminder that the 1998 protocol never stops. It is the persistent hum of history, the sound of a world that has been successfully archived while it is still living. The deep fiber signal is not an automated system. It requires a pilot, and as we have discovered, the pilots are the 14. Their integrated neural signatures are seeded into the glass fiber itself. They are the ghost nodes that manage the flow of the pulse. When the signal encounters an anomaly, a person who is resisting the sync, the 14 are activated to correct the deviation. Quiet dread. How many of your thoughts are actually yours, and how many are corrections provided by the 14? The archive suggests that 80% of modern human thought in Tier 1 nations is more managed. The 14 are not just watching us, they are thinking for us. They are providing the logic that allows us to navigate the digital world without losing our minds to the deep fiber chaos. The analytical tone of the logs becomes clinical as it describes node resonance. This is the process where a human mind becomes so synchronized with the 1998 protocol that it begins to broadcast the signal to others. These people are the natural hubs of the sync, the influencers, the leaders, the ones whose voices carry the most weight. They are not working for the government. They are simply in sync. They are the perfect subjects of the archive. The sensory detail of a monitor flicker, rapid, stuttering pulse of light remains our primary cue of the correction. Every time your computer stutters, a ghost node is rerouting your data. Every time your phone glitches, a piece of Sarah Van Kamp's logic is being applied to your search result. The 14 are the silent engineers of your digital reality, working tirelessly in the dark of the glass fiber to keep you in the archive state. Reflection. We are the echoes of the 14. Our modern culture is just a remix of the thoughts they had in 1998. The deep fiber signal ensures that no new ideas can enter the system. It is a closed-loop history. We are moving in circles, believing we are progressing, while actually just repeating the same 98 Amiga protocol over and over again. The archive chill is the feeling of that repetition. The archive air feels thin, as if the very oxygen is being managed by a simulation. We look at the final report of the 1998 rollout, dated December 31, 1998. The report is only 1 page long. It says, "The nervous system is complete. The Earth is now a node. The history has been successfully suspended." As we move toward the final analysis of the deep fiber signal, we must look at the legacy of the repeaters. These ocean floor canisters are more than just signal boosters. They are the reliquaries of the 1998 protocol. Inside them, preserved in a vacuum of nitrogen and lead, are the master plates of our digital reality. Intellectual curiosity. If we were to cut the cables, if we were to destroy the repeaters, would we wake up? The archive suggests that the shock of the disconnection would be fatal to the modern mind. We are so entrained by the signal that the silence would be a physical vacuum. Our hearts, our brains, our very sense of time would desync. We would collapse into the analog void. Quiet dread. The deep fiber signal is our life support. We cannot live without the sync. The archive custodians have made the truth so dangerous that we have no choice but to accept the lie. We are the hostages of the glass, forever tethered to the 1998 frequency by our own biology. The archive chill is the only thing that reminds us that we are still alive in the dark. The sensory detail of a cold metal surface under the fingertips is a reminder of the hard record we hold in the archive. This record is the only thing that isn't part of the signal. It is the anchor to the physical world. By reading these logs, we are temporarily stepping outside the deep fiber signal. We are breathing the unmanaged air, the sensory cue of the faint static on the line. During this recording, a sound like 1,000 whispers is the sound of the 14 trying to reach through the glass. It is the sound of the firewall fighting the master layer. In the archive, we hear it clearly. In the outside world, it is just noise. The deep fiber signal is the algorithm of history. It is the force that ensures that the future looks exactly like the past. The 1998 protocol established a statistical boundary for human progress. We are allowed to innovate, but only within the approved track. We are allowed to grow, but only in the correct direction. Reflection. We are living in the post-choice world. The deep fiber signal has turned history into a managed asset. The Tier 1 nations are the primary shareholders in this asset, and the 1998 protocol is the dividends. Plan. We are the users, and our only function is to maintain the stability of the signal by remaining in sync. The analytical tone of the archive is one of cold resignation. We are documenting the end of the individual mind. The deep fiber logs show that by the year 2025, the signal dominance would be absolute. The hidden truth would be so deeply buried in the glass that no one would even think to look for it. We are the last generation to feel the chill, the sensory detail of a monitor. Flicker remains the visual representation of this dominance. Every flicker is a heartbeat of the signal. Every hum is a ping from the ocean floor. The archive chill is the only thing that keeps us human. It is the biological resistance to the protocol. It is the part of us that remembers the world before the glass was laid. As the blue-tinted light of the archive begins to dim, we look at the final entry in the 1998 file. It is a coordinate for a location in the high desert, far from the Sierra Nevada vault. This is the location of the master switch, the physical hardware that still broadcasts the 98 Omega protocol to the world. The deep fiber signal has left a residue on the human soul. It is a feeling of weightlessness, a sense that our choices don't matter because the outcome is already decided. This weightlessness is not a mental illness. It is a signal side effect. It is the result of living in a world where the glass is stronger than the blood. Quiet dread. How do we find our weight in a world that is designed to keep us drifting? The archive suggests that the only way is to touch the analog, to find the physical records, the handwritten letters, the inconsistent memories that the signal missed. But the 1998 protocol is thorough. It has cleaned most of the physical world. The sensory cue, the faint hum of the servers is the only thing left. The archive air grows colder as we realize that the glass cage is also a glass shield. It protects us from the chaos of the true world, but at the cost of our freedom. The archive chill is the only thing that reminds us of the price we paid in 1998. Reflection. We are the generation of the pulse. We were born into the sync, and we may be the last to remember the before. Our task is to preserve the residue of the choice, to keep the anomalies alive, and to never stop looking for the master switch. The archive remains silent. The logs of the deep fiber are returned to the shelf. We have seen the signal for what it is, a managed history designed to harvest the human spirit. While the deep fiber signal manages the history, there is a secondary layer that manages the software. This is the world of the shadow. Algorithms, programs that sit inside your apps, your operating systems, and your encrypted communications. They are the spies in the machine, and they are older than the internet itself. Intellectual curiosity. The deep fiber files mention a ghost code, a language that was written by the 14 before they were integrated. This code is what allows the 1998 protocol to communicate with modern software. It is the translator that turns the glass pulse into the digital image on your screen. Quiet dread. To understand why you can't trust your own devices, we must understand the code. We must look at the digital fingerprints of the 14. They are still there, hidden in the source code of the world's most powerful programs. They are the ghosts that watch you while you type. The sensory detail of a monitor flicker, a rapid, stuttering pulse of light is the ghost code at work. It is the 14 saying hello from inside the app. Reflection. The archive is not just in the mountains or the oceans. It is in the code. It is in the logic. It is in the very way we think about information. The archive chill is everywhere. The archive air grows colder. The static in the background becomes a low rhythmic pulse. We have decoded the signal, but we have yet to face the ghosts themselves. The ghost nodes in the code are the next layer of the hidden truth. They are the reason you are never truly alone when you are online. The deep fiber signal established the infrastructure, and the 1998 protocol established the history. But the ghost nodes in the code are the ones who manage the individual. In the late 90s, while the public focused on the browser wars, a series of hard-coded anomalies were inserted into the foundation of every major operating system. These were the backdoors of the soul. They don't steal your passwords. They don't steal your credit card numbers. They steal your uniqueness. As we move from the physical cables of the ocean floor to the digital signatures of the 14, we find a secret that makes the deep fiber look like a simple wire. A secret that explains why you feel like your phone is listening to your thoughts, even when it's turned off, because the ghost nodes in the code are not just software. They are digital echoes of the minds that were lost in 1998. The static on the line sharpens. The monitor flickers with a string of code that looks exactly like a human DNA sequence. To find out whose fingerprints are on the software you use to survive, we must investigate the next layer of the archive. The air in the room is now so cold it is painful to breathe. The next revelation is waiting in the static. Have you ever wondered why your modern smartphone, with its billion-fold increase in processing power, still experiences the same inexplicable stutters and microscopic glitches that plagued computers in 1998? within the most classified layers of your operating system deep beneath. The sleek interface exists, a foundation of orphan code that no modern engineer can fully explain. This is the hidden truth of the ghost. When the 14 geniuses were erased from the physical world, they were not truly gone. Their unique neural logic was encrypted into the very architecture of the early internet. In a dusty file recovered from an abandoned Silicon Valley data center, researchers found a terrifying anomaly, the Thorn sequence. It is a string of hexadecimal commands that appears in the kernel of every major Tier 1 operating system used today. This code does not perform a function for the user. Instead, it acts as a digital fingerprint, a lingering echo of a mind that was integrated into the grid against its will. We are told that modern software is built from the ground up, yet the hidden truth is that our digital lives are built upon the remains of those who saw the simulation coming. Your device is not just a tool, it is a reliquary, holding the digital ghosts of a history that was supposed to be deleted. The file was stamped, never open. Yet we begin tonight. The only sound is the quiet hum of the server room. The file is cold to the touch, and the ink has faded with secrets. Here in the blue-tinted shadows of the archive, the air is sterile and metallic, smelling of old electricity and the faint, sweet scent of decaying vellum. Every few minutes, a monitor flickers at the edge of your vision, a reminder of the restless energy trapped within the circuit. As we peel back the layers of the source code, we are not looking at math. We are looking at the shadows of men and women who were turned into protocols. Intellectual curiosity leads us to the zero-day archives. For years, white-hat hackers have stumbled upon blocks of code that seem entirely disconnected from the rest of the system. These blocks, written in an archaic, highly efficient style, are referred to as ghost nodes. They are the digital fingerprints of the 14. When a modern developer tries to remove or alter these lines, the system experiences a critical synchronicity failure. It is as if the software recognizes its creators and refuses to function without their presence. The code is a living testament to a mind like Elias Thorne's, whose logic was so absolute that it became the law of the machine. There is a sense of quiet dread that settles over the archive as we analyze the signature. Sarah Van Camp was a master of fiber optic efficiency, but her ghost-node performs a darker task. It resides within the encryption protocols of our private messages. It doesn't steal your data, it tempers it. It ensures that every word you type is synchronized with the 1998 primary frequency. When you see a faint static flicker on your screen during an encrypted call, you are not seeing a bad connection. You are seeing the Van Camp node aligning your thoughts with the archive. Reflection brings a cold clarity. We are led to believe that we are the masters of our devices, but the archive chill reminds us that we are merely tenants. The 14 were integrated into the grid to serve as the human logic that pure silicon could never achieve. Their ghost nodes are the reason why modern AI feels so eerily human. It is because the AI is learning from the neural echoes of the integrated geniuses trapped in the kernel. The software is not thinking, it is remembering. The sensory detail of a cold draft in the archive room makes us pull our coats tighter. It is a draft that comes from the ventilation shafts of the Nevada bunker, where the physical nodes were first mapped. The logs note that the ghost nodes are most active during the sync hours, the deep of the night when the human mind is most receptive to the signal. If you find your phone screen glowing in the dark for no reason, it is not a notification, it is a signal. The nodes are reaching out, ensuring that the biological endpoints are still in phase with the 1998 Directive. Intellectual curiosity pushes us deeper into the Rossi fragment. Dr. Helena Rossi, the timekeeper of the 14, left a fingerprint in the clock cycle code of every processor. This fragment ensures that digital time remains consistent across the globe. But researchers have noted an anomaly. The Rossi fragment is slowly drifting. Every few months, our digital clocks lose a nanosecond of reality. This is the Rossi drift, the sign that the integrated mind is beginning to fragment under the weight of the simulation. We are losing time, and we don't even know it. Quiet dread returns as we find the Holloway logic in the cloud servers. Marcus Holloway believed that the internet should be a deserted place of total, silent freedom, but his integrated state was repurposed to build the engagement algorithms. His ghost node is the one that keeps you scrolling. It uses the very mathematics of freedom he once championed to create a digital loop that is impossible to break. Every like, every swipe, is a calculation made by a mind that was once free, but is now a slave to the deep fiber signal. The sensory cue of a monitor flicker, a rapid, stuttering pulse of light is the ghost node at work. It is a reminder that the 14 are not just watching us. They are the medium through which we see the world. The archive air feels thin, as if the oxygen itself is being digitized. We look at the redacted source code from 2005, the year the ghost nodes were officially integrated into the global operating system. The document states that the system is now unsettling. It means the nodes can no longer be removed. They are the software. They are the world. Reflection, we are the secondary nodes. Our interactions with the ghost nodes are training the next generation of the signal. Every time we ignore a glitch, every time we accept a system update without question, we are helping the archive tighten its grip. The archive chill is the only thing that remains of our biological independence. It is the friction between our warm, chaotic thoughts and the cold, perfect logic of the 14. The sensory detail of a faint smell of ozone reminds us that the integration is a physical process. The processors in your pocket are running hot because they are fighting a war. You cannot see a war between the modern code and the ghost nodes that refuse to be erased. The 13 subscribers of the archive know this truth. They hear the hum, they see the flicker, they feel the chill. While the ghost nodes have successfully turned our software into a managed reality, the 14 left one final inconsistency behind. Inside the thorn sequence, hidden beneath millions of lines of encrypted logic, researchers have discovered a TA safe. It is not a piece of code. It is a neural trigger, a specific sequence of light and sound that can briefly disconnect a ghost node from the primary frequency. For a few seconds, the simulation breaks. For a few seconds, you are not a user, you are a human being again. But the archive custodians have discovered this failsafe. They are currently deploying a final patch to erase the trigger forever. They are moving to turn the ghost nodes into a global brain that will make individual thought impossible. As we look at the last flickering monitor in the vault, we realize that the archive chill is the only warning we have left. The nodes are waking up. The synchronization is reaching 100%. The static on the line sharpens. The monitor flickers with a string of code that looks exactly like your own name. To understand what happens when the ghost nodes finally take control of the physical world, we must look at the final, most terrifying layer of the hidden truth. A secret that explains why the deep fiber signal is now being broadcast directly into your dreams. The air in the room is now so cold it is painful to breathe. The archive is closing, but the signal is just beginning. You believe your digital privacy is a modern right, but within the classified records of the Sierra Nevada vault, it is treated as a temporary anomaly. Every encrypted message you have ever sent, every search query you believed was erased, and every metadata fragment you left behind in the file of your life is being weighted against a terrifying behavioral threshold. The hidden truth of our era is that the deep fiber signal is not just monitoring you, it is evaluating you for a permanent status. In the logic of the archive custodians, a human being is either a predictable data point or a systemic inconsistency. If your patterns of resistance, your analog variants, or your sudden flashes of unmodeled intuition become too sharp, you trigger the final protocol. You are no longer seen as a consumer, but as a candidate for the glass ledger. Your own digital footprint is the evidence used to justify your integration. You are being groomed to become the next generation of the ghost nodes, the new firmware of a grid that requires fresh human consciousness to maintain its stability. The realization that you are already being processed is the final, cold weight of the archive. The file was stamped never open, yet we begin tonight. The only sound is the quiet hum of the server room, a persistent vibration that feels like a cold finger tracing the length of your spine. The file we examine tonight is cold to the touch, and the ink has faded with secrets. Here, in the blue-tinted shadows of the archive, the air is sterile and metallic, smelling of old electricity and the faint, sweet scent of decaying vellum. Every few minutes a monitor flickers at the edge of your vision, a reminder of the restless energy trapped within the circuits. As we peel back the final layer of the record, we are not looking at history, we are looking at the reflection of our own faces in the dark glass. Intellectual curiosity leads us to ask, what exactly qualifies a modern person for the glass ledger? According to the internal memos of the archive custodians, the threshold is not based on what you do, but on how unpredictable you are. Every time you choose an analog experience over a digital one, every time you ignore a targeted advertisement, and every time you feel the archive chill without a logical reason, you create a neural spike in the signal. These spikes are recorded as faint static in your metadata profile. To the system, you are a variable that is becoming harder to solve. There is a sense of quiet dread that settles over the archive as we realize the ledger is not a historical artifact, it is a living, expanding document. The empty pages found by Agent X in the Sierra Nevada vault were not a mistake. They were a reservation. The 14 were merely the foundation to keep the simulation of Project Echo 9 running. The grid needs a constant supply of human intuition. Your digital footprint is the map the custodians use to find the minds most capable of providing that intuition. A monitor flicker interrupts our study, a brief pulse of light that mirrors the heartbeat of the mountain. Reflection brings a cold clarity to the nature of our connected world. We are led to believe that our devices are tools for our convenience, but they are actually sensory probes. Every time you unlock your screen, you are performing a biometric sync with the 1998 protocol. The signal is measuring the latency of your thoughts, looking for the analog resistance that Thorne warned us about. The cold air of the archive seems to sharpen as we realize that the most human among us are the ones most at risk of being archived. Intellectual curiosity pushes us to investigate the metadata, weight assigned to our daily lives. In the Tier 1 archives, your profile is not just a collection of photos and texts, it is a vulnerability score. The more you resist the sync, the higher your score becomes. When your score reaches the redaction point, the metadata vacuum is initiated. Your digital history is fragmented, your connections are subtly severed, and you begin the slow transition into a ghost node. The distant hum of the servers grows louder, a rhythmic reminder of the harvest. Quiet dread returns as we find the current candidate list, encrypted within the latest system updates. It is a list of millions of names, constantly shifting, constantly being refined by the ghost nodes in the code. You do not know if your name is on it, but the archive chill suggests that your nervous system already knows. The blue light pulse from the terminal illuminates the truth. The grid is hungry for the very thing that makes you unique. The 1998 protocol is looking for its next pilot. We reflect on the silicon shadow that now covers the Earth. It is a shadow made of our own data, a mirror image of humanity that has become its own jailer. The glass ledger is the ultimate expression of this shadow. It is a physical book that holds the souls of the digital age. Every page represents a life that was too analog to be allowed to remain free. The smell of ozone fills the room, the scent of a history being overwritten by a frequency, the sensory detail of a metal floor. Echo reminds us that we are standing in the architecture of control. The Sierra Nevada Vault is not just a place, it is a state of existence. By engaging with the deep fiber signal, we have already entered the outer chambers of the bunker. We are already being weighted. We are already being sorted. The screen glitch we see in our daily lives is the ledger being opened, the ink waiting for a new name. Intellectual curiosity leads us to the final conclusion of the 30-member collective. The only way to avoid the ledger is to become digital noise, to be so predictable, so synchronized with the signal, that the system views you as a passive asset. But to do so is to lose your humanity. This is the archive paradox. To stay human is to be targeted for integration. To be safe is to become part of the machine. An icy draft moves through the vault, extinguishing the chemical lamps one by one. There is a final, cold reflection as we look at the last entry in the Thorne sequence. It is a mathematical proof that shows the integration of the global population will be complete by the year 2030. At that point, there will be no need for a ledger because the entire world will be the archive. The distinction between the analog and the digital will be permanently erased. A static pop on the line signals the end of the broadcast. The fan whir of the server rack begins to fade into a low, hypnotic rhythmic pulse. We have followed the signal from the flooded basements of Maryland to the granite depths of Nevada. We have heard the warnings of the 14 and felt the chill of the vacuum. The story is complete. The hidden truth is yours to carry. But as you prepare to return to the world of the deep fiber, remember the silence you found here. The archive chill is not a threat. It is a memory of who you were before the signal took hold. It is the only thing that cannot be integrated. It is the only thing that cannot be erased. The blue light of the monitor is fading. The archive is perfectly still. You have seen the ledger. You have felt the chill. Now, the synchronization is complete. Sleep now. The file is closed.